And welcome into the Friday edition of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, sponsored by Volunteer State Bank. Real people, real solutions right here. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic, intern Will here with you on this Friday morning. We got the full house today here on the show, and today's a big day. We're going to get a lot into the Vols from last night, but it's an even bigger day for intern Will, who will be getting married this weekend. So, Will, congratulations. We appreciate you being here with us today before your marriage, and we'll tease you about that all show long today. So enjoy that.
Sounds good to me.
That's what we do here.
Joe, I'm ready for it to happen. I'm excited, but
sure
more so, I will say it's almost just a sigh of relief. all the planning and everything is finally coming to the end.
That's
Not
right.
that I did a whole lot, more so for my soon-to-be wife.
That's right.
Yeah,
Well,
excited.
congratulations, buddy. We're very happy for you here on the show. Joe Rexrode.
Yeah, Will.
How are we doing?
Good. So was it rehearsal dinner tonight then?
Rehearsal
actually,
dinner?
Since it's Labor Day weekend, we're doing a Sunday wedding.
There you go.
So rehearsal dinner will be tomorrow night.
There you go.
Okay. All right, man. Did you write vows?
Did you write
Did
vows?
you write vows?
We did not. We're just letting the officiant take care of that.
There you go.
Repeat it after him.
That's right. There you go. Well, congratulations.
Good for
Will.
you.
Very, very well done. Looking forward to that, and to a very successful wedding weekend for intern Will. Joe Rexrode, how we doing? What's going on?
I'm okay. How's the lighting in the hotel room here? Good?
Looks good. Yeah,
Got enough light.
looks real
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, good. Late night with the Vols last night. Late night with the Vols.
Was it late night? That is for sure.
It was interesting.
It was interesting. Is a good way to put it. A 38-6 win for Tennessee in Josh Heupel's first game. So Tennessee, from a margin of victory standpoint, I guess right around where Las Vegas thought they were going to be. I thought the 34.5 was a little bit too much, and I may have made some action on that on the FanDuel Sportsbook, and it turns out it was for Tennessee. So felt good about that to begin the season. Look, Joe, we'll get into a little bit more of the Joe Milton conversation coming up in the next segment, because I think that's probably the number one talking point from last night's game, and we're going to get hot and heavy into that. Let's start with, I guess, some of the positives in the game. It's 38-6, so Tennessee's not really in a position where you can ever really complain about a 32-point margin of victory. So it was important to get the win, obviously, and look, it became apparent very on that Bowling Green, they are awful. And that was one of the worst college football teams that I think I've ever watched. They are that bad. They are really, really bad. But Tennessee ran the ball extremely well. I don't think that's a huge surprise. They put up 326 yards of rushing. Joe, if you couldn't run the ball well against this team, it was going to be tough sledding for the rest of the year.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was a 326-36 edge on the ground in this game. I'm with you. I think that, honestly, when Tennessee plays Tennessee Tech in South Alabama, I think Tennessee might see more resistance than Bowling Green gave them. And the thing is, Bowling Green actually strung together a few stops in a row before Tennessee said, okay, well, we'll just run the ball at them and, dominate them up front. It's just a very tough game to take a whole bunch out of. I think efficiency and production in the passing game, which after the first two drives, I was like, geez, they're going to, they can get to 70 if they want. And, Joe Milton's going to throw for about 400, but boy, did that change quickly. I will say, though, to your point on both running backs, I thought looked good, and just, again, even with the upfront domination, some really impressive runs and cuts and speed to the edge. I mean, I do like the two backs. They're kind of similar, but they're both good.
Yeah, they are. And look, I thought both of them hit the hole with confidence. There wasn't a whole lot of hesitation there from either Tyon Evans or Jabari Small. They both end up with 116 yards rushing on the ground in the game. So you feel good about that 1-2 punch if you're Tennessee. And look, we've talked to people all week that feel pretty good about this running back room, even with Eric Gray out. And 326 yards on the ground. Of course, Joe Milton was a part of that as well with 2 rushing touchdowns last night. I think you feel good about that moving forward. I thought the defense looked pretty good and dominated in a way that you thought. I mean, they had their moments in the second quarter where it got a little hairy and Bowling Green was able to put some drives together. Apparently, Bowling Green's got a very good field goal kicker, so we learned that last night as well. But all in all, I thought defensively they played pretty well. I mean, they're just, physically so much more equipped than Bowling Green's line was, where Tennessee just totally controlled the line of scrimmage on that side of the ball for most of the night.
Yeah, and again, that's just where, man, how much can you take out of that moving forward? You better dominate that team up front. I will say specifically, a couple guys we actually talked about yesterday. Elijah Simmons, you definitely noticed him on some plays, active. I think he's an intriguing player this year. And then Tyler Barron had some great pass rush reps. Another guy we talked about that we're looking forward to seeing that we didn't see was Byron Young, which is really interesting. And Josh Heupel talked about him after the game. I mean, basically, it's the transfer. And this is so weird when this happens. Like right before the opening game, there's like an issue with the eligibility and the transferring in. So Heupel made it seem like, it's basically a red tape thing that they hope that they can figure out, by next week. They could use them. It would be, against a team like Pittsburgh or just, any of these better teams are going to play, add what he's supposed to be to Barron. And that's some pass rush potential.
Yep, I thought Theo Jackson played really well last night in the secondary. Alontae Taylor played well. I mean, there was never really a time, other than a couple of drives in the second quarter where, they hit on a couple of wheel routes. There's really never a time other than that where Tennessee felt all that threatened against Bowling Green in the game, especially while they were on the defensive side of the ball. But it got a little sloppy for the Vols on offense in the second quarter. I was with you. They came out on the first two drives, and I was like, well, Tennessee, that minus 34.5 is going to look pretty good by halftime if you're Tennessee at that point. And then things started to stall after that. And, Joe, it really kind of began with taking some deep shots down the field. Number one, I thought with a couple exceptions in the game, I mean, Joe Milton had all day to throw back there, and he just missed on some receive. I mean, he had Cedric Tillman down the field twice that he missed. Jalen Hyatt, for as gifted as he is, had a couple of big drops in the game as well. They didn't quite involve as many receivers as I thought they would in the game, and I'll be honest, I came away from last night's game extremely disappointed with the passing game. I thought the passing game was poor last night from the Tennessee team. And, look, it's not like the plays weren't there. Again, it's a 32-point margin of victory, so it's hard to nitpick too much. But I felt like they left some plays on the field last night offensively. And, Jordan Rodgers was talking about this on the broadcast. There were a lot of times when you were able to actually see a replay on the broadcast because Josh Heupel and Tennessee and company were going about every 3 seconds snapping the ball, which we'll talk about that a little bit more coming up as well. But Joe Milton was just missing some guys in his reads down the field, not only missing with the ball, but missing some wide open receivers as well. So all in all, Joe, I got to say I was not impressed with Tennessee's passing game last night.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I will say that, and sitting next to David Ubben last night, we'll have David on later. I mean, he made a good point. Bowling, it's a little weird. You would have figured at some point that Bowling Green would have sold out a little bit more against the run. They really didn't bring the extra hat in like maybe you would have expected. So, I mean, the game plan for them was, we're not going to let them tear us up in the passing game. That said, there were still plays to be made. There were receivers to hit, and it just really got clunky and stagnated after those first two drives. The first two drives, they went super fast, and it was it was scripted,
sure,
but it was a lot of quick stuff. And then you're hitting the screen, Now you're setting up the the hitch and go, which actually, that drew a holding. I think they drew another piece. So those stats, which are certainly not great, you have to take that into account too. And look, you're going to miss some bombs. That's going to happen. But like talking to Steve Lehman on the field last night, it's like, well, when you play good teams, you got to hit that pass. But I think the bigger question, I guess concern to me is just, sometimes getting the ball out and just seeing something quickly and getting it there.
Yep.
I just felt like Joe Milton held the ball and at times, just sort of saw the rush rather than staying in there, hanging in there, get the ball on the field. Also, to your point, I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback just stand like that.
No. I mean, he was calling out routes, standing in the pocket with his hand. He was like pointing down the field, telling his receivers where to go.
I don't know how good Pittsburgh is, but let me promise you something. That will not happen this week. One thing Pat Narduzzi absolutely will. He will go down. He'll give up 60 points, but he will blitz the quarterback. He will bring pressure all day. That's what he's done his entire career. And it's just about to get very different. But yeah, like there's having a clean pocket, and then there's just sort of like literally flat-footed, like, looking around. Yeah, it's so. I mean, it's a weird game. I mean, I think you saw like the arm talent is spectacular, but again, arm talent also means like the touch and being able to take a little bit off that fastball sometimes, so that you can complete passes.
Well, I mean, yeah, I tweeted this out last night. I mean, about the second or third throw of the game by Milton, I was like, all right, he could probably stand on the 50-yard line and literally throw it out of the stadium. I mean, that guy's got an unbelievable arm. Now, can you harness that and actually effectively play the quarterback position? Because that was not winning quarterback play last night as Tennessee moves forward here. And that's going to be something they're going to have to figure out. We'll continue the discussion on Joe Milton and the quarterback position for Tennessee coming up next. Take your thoughts as well on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. What stood out to you last night in Tennessee's win against Bowling Green? All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, brought to you by Volunteer State Bank, conveniently serving Middle Tennessee with 13 locations. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Talking Vols. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025, discussing Joe Milton and the offense's performance last night in a 38-6 win for the Vols against Bowling Green. And Joe Milton finishes 11 of 23 on the night, 140 yards and a touchdown. Now, the good news is, at least from an interception standpoint, he did not turn the ball over. Did have a fumble that he turned the ball over on. And to be fair, had a couple of drops in the game as well. He hit Jalen Hyatt on, I think, a kind of a crossing route over the middle. It was behind him a little bit, but Hyatt, a ball he should catch. And then down in the red zone, absolutely a ball that Jalen Hyatt should catch that hit him right between the ones. So it wasn't all on Joe Milton last night in terms of the lack of production in the passing game, but he did miss some throws, and it was interesting. Like, the arm talent, you can see why physically people are enamored with Joe Milton. I mean, he's huge. He can move really well, and he can just launch the ball. I mean, he's got arm talent in terms of his ability to launch the ball down the field that I don't know that I've ever seen from a Tennessee quarterback. I mean, he can absolutely chuck the ball down the field. The touch was not quite there for Joe Milton last night, and that's going to be kind of the main talking point today is the throws that Joe Milton missed. But I think I came away from last night's game, Joe, more concerned about the reads that Joe Milton missed. And I think both are fixable, both are coachable, and you're going to see probably a lot of people freak out today about the quarterback play. It's week 1. There is time to grow and improve throughout the season. They're going to have to if they're going to beat Pittsburgh next week. But to your point, Pittsburgh's going to bring the pressure. There's going to be blitzes involved, and there's going to be plays where you're going to have to go from your first read to your second read to your third read pretty quickly. And I didn't think Joe Milton did a very good job of that last night.
By the way, I'm looking at your Twitter account because you said that you tweeted that you could throw it out the 50-yard line. I swear, unless this was a subconscious thing, I did not plagiarize you. I would like to make that clear because I wrote in my column today that he could stand at the 50 and get it over the Tennessee River.
Yeah,
so
that's pretty good.
Either I subconsciously plagiarize you, or it's just we were starting to share the same brain.
Maybe so. That's a scary thought.
Which is very scary. Maybe it's good to have some separation today.
I guess so.
So here's the thing on the reads. I agree with you. Now, early, that's one of the things I liked on those first 2 drives. There were a few plays where the first thing was taken away. He extended the play rolling, and he went through the progressions. And, and in a couple of cases, just threw seeds, to his receivers. And I was like, okay, see, not just like the big arm, but, he's seeing the field. He's going through the reads. He's going to, I think on one of them, it must have been at least his third read, and I forget who he threw it to, but it was impressive. I liked everything about those first 2 drives. Yes, a lot of it, scripted, but he still improvised and did so well. But I agree, there's just some – so, first of all, I think it's obvious, and I actually meant to ask him this last night and didn't get it in, but it seems obvious that he and Tillman must have some kind of a connection because, man, Tillman is – the last guy of this receiving core that you would think of on the post, right? There are faster guys. Tillman's big physical guy, but clearly he and Milton must have a connection. And obviously they got the TD late, which was a good. Milton just kind of threw that one up, and Tillman came back and got it. It was a good play, but there was a play where Milton threw to a double Tillman, and man, he had Hyatt just alone. For a big play, and there's just some. And look, Heupel, I will say I was a little surprised. Heupel didn't. He cut right to the chase. The reads, the throw, the action. It has to be better. Rather than I thought maybe it'd be we'll look at the film and everything. There's a lot to like, and we'll see. But he saw it from the sideline. This has got to get better. So. I think that if you're a Tennessee fan freaking out right now, what I would say is it is a weird game a strange opponent, and I think sometimes it might even mess you up when the clock in your head doesn't have to go off. You know, it's like boom, 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 get it out, and it's like do 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 do. You know, that's which is basically what it was. It could make for kind of a weird, disjointed kind of game. But this is also, Robbie, this is exactly what we've talked about. What was it at Michigan? You know, what was he at Michigan? What is he now? Is this a big break for Tennessee? And are these Tennessee coaches going to take this massive amount of talent and mold it into something that is efficient in this offense? Do they find things in this offense that work for him? I mean, there's a lot on them here to get more out of him and get better efficiency out of him.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. And, you know, the issues we saw last night are correctable as you move forward. It's just, you know, the teams that you're going to be playing, it's a big step up in competition. I mean, that Bowling Green's defense was atrocious. I mean, they're just not good. And to only have 140 yards of passing offense if you're Joe Milton against that team, I think it's concerning. You know, I saw Austin Stanley last night of A to Z Sports tweet this out, and I agree. Like, eventually in the second half, Tennessee just decided, you know what, we're going to run the ball, and it worked, and they scored, and that's great. I mean, you do what works in the game, and I understand that. But running the ball all over the place against Bowling Green doesn't really mean much to me. I mean, they gave up over 300 yards a game on the ground last year. So you ought to be able to run the ball against Bowling Green. And to Joe Milton's credit, you know, when he put it down and he ran, I think you can see some of the ability that he brings to the table. I mean, that last touchdown run he had, that was like a Derrick Henry-esque stiff arm that he threw out there. It was a nice play by Joe Milton there. But the passing offense, there's some work to do on that front, and I thought they would be more explosive than they ended up being. Tim on YouTube says if you need Joe Milton to throw it 40 yards, he can throw it 40 yards. If you need him to throw it 30 yards, he'll still throw it 40 yards just with a flick of his wrist. That was the weird thing last night on some of those deep balls, and Jordan Rodgers talked about this on the broadcast too. It looked like he was just barely throwing it, and there would be just a laser 50 yards down the field.
No, I mean the early one where he overshot Tillman, I think it was about 65 yards in the air, and I swear he didn't put anything into the throw. It's like, bing. Look, I understand why any coach would be like, whoa. I mean, he can just do things that other players just flat out can't do. I mean, if Joe Milton's a quarterback all year for Tennessee, there's going to be a lot of spectacular. But what you have to have is a lot more of the easy, simple gimmies. You got to get the ball out quicker. And on the run game, I agree. When he gets going, you know, he's tough to bring down. But this was also criticism of him at Michigan, and I think you saw it last night. He's a little bit late to decide sometimes to run. Now, it's interesting because a lot of times you think of quarterbacks and you say, well, hang in there, make throws, which I agree. Like, that needs to be better too. But there were some times where it had broken down, and I thought that he needed to go earlier. I thought the quarterback design run stuff last night was good, and I mean that should be a part of this offense. I think that can be effective, but he does need a little bit to get started, which it shouldn't be that big of a surprise. The guy's 6'5", 245, Yeah. And that's where he got caught by the rush a couple times where, he didn't have quick feet getting out of it. So it's just a really interesting skill set. We had somebody on the text line, Robby, yesterday who got really mad because I was talking about Michigan State, which I thought was hilarious. Oh, yeah. I gotta remember to talk about Michigan State more. But I will right here. I always make this comparison because this guy is not that talented. I saw way more talented people than this guy, and there are way more talented people than him in the NFL. But the thing about Kirk Cousins was he did the simple. He saw it, boom, he anticipated the throw, and he was accurate, quick. And that is more valuable as a quarterback than it is to be able to throw the ball 100 yards. It just is. So they've got to, Joe Milton has got to work on that. And, they've got to do a better job too of getting him ready for that, because it's just going to look like a totally different game this week. Let's go to I guess not this week, next week.
That's right. Let's go to our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Got a texture that says, when did we move to a time when a 35-point win is not acceptable? Yes, the team still has things to work on, but at the end of the season, is anyone going to look back and say this was nothing but a win? If Alabama only won by 21 in their first game, would you be as critical? Just as a point of reference, as well as I'm not a Tennessee fan. Well,
Okay.
look, I hear what you're saying. 32 points, that's an impressive margin of victory. And if you're a Tennessee fan, based on where this program is, yes, you'll take that. I think the larger issue is we knew Tennessee was going to beat Bowling Green. Bowling Green is awful. They are a terrible football team. If the offense plays last night from a passing game standpoint like they play against Pittsburgh, they're not going to win. So you've got to fix that as you move forward here.
Yeah. I mean, you have to keep it in context. Yes, 32-point win. Bowling Green they've got a chance to be absolutely one of the worst teams in college football this year. Make no mistake about it.
They're terrible.
Yeah, and look, Scott Loeffler, I mean, I think, it's year 3. Well, I think he's 3-15. It's not working out well. And really, my brother-in-law is a Bowling Green grad, very upset right now. They've had a lot of success over the years.
Yeah.
You should never be this bad at Bowling Green, but they are. They're bad. So, yeah, you can talk about 32-point win. And again, there were some players who played well. You cannot count on doing that up front to anyone but, again, Tennessee Tech, South Alabama, and I'm probably not even that bad against them. So you have to do the throw game stuff way better. And again, that's supposed to be what Josh Heupel and his staff brings. And it's got to be much better to beat anybody credible.
We'll continue the conversation on the Vols when we come back. Take more of your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. That's coming up next. Right now, though, got to tell you about my friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, and they're hooking new users up with 30-1 odds for the first big college football game of the season. You can pick either Georgia or Clemson to win, and you can turn a $5 bet into a $150 payday. I've been on the Georgia train all week. I really like JT Daniels. I think the Dogs are going to get it done against Dabo and Clemson, but you take it any way you want to take it. Sign up and make your first deposit to kick off the college football season on America's #1 sportsbook, and there's no better place to bet college football than on FanDuel Sportsbook. It's the #1 rated sportsbook app in America. It's easy to use, and you get paid in as little as 24 hours. So make the most out of college football this week with enhanced 30-1 odds on Georgia versus Clemson. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Sign up using promo code ROB so they know that we sent you. That promo code is ROB. You must be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. New users only. Must wager in designated offer market. A $10 first deposit required. $150 max bonus. Bonus for Tennessee users fulfilled in site credit within 72 hours. Tennessee site credit expires 14 days after receipt. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Got a gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. ESPN 94.9 is the official English radio home of the Nashville Soccer Club. Listen in tonight as Nashville SC takes on New York City at Nissan Stadium. Pregame starts at 6:15 and the match begins at 6:30. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, brought to you by Volunteer State Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Talking Vols, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. And we got a lot of thoughts to get to, so we'll roll through them. CD texting in on the text line. I was already pretty down on this team, but seeing them struggle to push the ball down the field just confirms this will be another long, miserable season for UT. This team has seriously tested my fandom the last few years. Joe Rexrode, that didn't take very long.
We got the whole spectrum. We got, how could you not be happy with a blowout win and this scrap the season? I would say, come in somewhere in the middle there. It was it's not like we've never seen a college football team or pro football team, for that matter, look real clunky offensively early in a season and figure some things out. I mean, it's not hopeless. If I were Josh Heupel right now, I would be sticking with Joe Milton.
Yep.
I would be pouring everything into Joe Milton, and again, I'd be trying to unlock, solve the riddle of, okay, this is some stuff that like few people can do. What can we do to get the best out of him? And also be watching a lot of Pittsburgh film, because, man, they will bring it. They're going to bring the heat next week.
Let's go back to the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Ben texting in, I'd rather see Bailey so we can run and pass. Milton is an athlete, but I don't care. SEC defenses can stop him easier if we're too one-dimensional, or anyone that can throw better if not Bailey. Milton won't satisfy anyone. I can tell why Michigan let him go. So Ben out on Joe Milton.
Scrap the season, scrap the quarterback.
Oh.
Yeah, look, hey, I think if you're realistically looking at that game, it was disappointing.
Sure.
Joe Milton was disappointing, without question. And it's interesting because I think if there's one thing that was different from like the last half of last year against Michigan, obviously the thumb, which no one knew about at the time, limits your ability to make some of those just blistering throws probably, right? I mean, look, you can make up for a lot of mistakes when you can throw the ball like that at the last minute and still fit it into a place. But you've got to, you got to anticipate throws better. And again, I just think that a lot of the things that were talked about when people didn't know about the thumb last year showed up again last night. And that's disappointing.
Yeah. Chris texting in, imagine Milton playing basketball. He'd never score. Laser beam line drive shots will never go in the hoop. He's got to learn to drop it in the bucket and let the receiver go get the ball. Amazing arm talent, though. I will say, and I know that Hyatt had a couple of drops last night, but they never really tried the straight-up vertical route with Hyatt last night. And, Tillman's a good player, but Tillman's not as fast as Jalen Hyatt. I do wonder if Hyatt could have got under a couple of those.
Yeah, again, like of all people that you would have thought to be involved in plays like that, Tillman would not have been my first pick or probably my third pick. So, yeah, I will say, too, the second drop by Hyatt, like that was a hell of a throw.
Oh, yeah.
That was, perfect. And that was a great job of quickly seeing it. He threw him open. It was right there. I thought exactly the right velocity you wanted, and Hyatt's got to come up with that. Hyatt still had some plays, but got to come up with that one.
So towards the end of the game, and we thought we would see multiple quarterbacks last night. Thought there's a chance we could see all three quarterbacks last night. Towards the end of the game, finally, Hendon Hooker was inserted into the game as, I guess, the second-string quarterback last night. Did you read anything into that? Do you think Hendon Hooker is the number 2 quarterback moving forward? How do you go about reading something like that last night if you're Harrison Bailey?
Well, based on the spring, too, I think Hooker's the number 2. I mean, based on the spring, Hooker was better than Bailey in the spring. I think anybody would evaluate it that way. I think the coaches clearly did. And, I don't know why they would put the 3 in at that point instead of the 2. So, yeah, I think it's Hooker is next. I think if Milton falters, that's who comes in. And, Hooker could be the better option. I mean, I'd keep the mind open on all this stuff. I think Bailey is third. And I know, again, I don't think that Bailey's a bad player. I think there's a lot of potential there. But I'm not all that surprised by that. I think Hooker's been in a similar offense, and I think what I've seen from him is he may be a little better at getting the ball out quick. Again, he does not have the tools that Joe Milton has, but who knows? I mean, he could end up being a better option. I think last night, Robby, they would have gone to him and maybe Bailey too, but at least him for some actual series.
Yeah.
If Milton had played better and they didn't, like, to me, it was just like, God, you got to get him out there again and like work on stuff. Now they were still running the ball a lot, but like I just feel like the way it went was you got to get him as many reps as you can get him right now. Versus had the first 2 drives turned into like 5 or 6 drives like that, then I think that they probably get a Hooker in there to actually work with the offense.
Yeah, I'd say you're probably right about that. It was interesting, though, the pace last night and the speed at which Josh Heupel and this offense want to play with. I mean, it looked totally different than what we were used to under Jeremy Pruitt and Jim Chaney. Tennessee runs 88 plays last night, and you mentioned – the first 2 drives, I mean, they were at warp speed last night for Tennessee. And, it's interesting. They get the ball whenever they're down. They run immediately to the umpire. They throw it to the umpire. The ball's spotted, and there they are again going. I mean, even last night when Hendon Hooker came into the game and there was 2 minutes left, they're still going like 1,000 miles an hour offensively. What did you think of that style of play? Obviously, going to be something they continue to work on as they go through the season here. And do you think that can translate playing at that speed at the SEC level?
Well, I think they have to. I mean, I think that's a big advantage that they have to have. They've got to catch defenses a little bit late reacting to things. They got to catch defenses unable to substitute. When Tennessee goes in these drives, it's like, you're the running back on this drive. You're the running back on this drive. You're the receivers on this drive. They don't sub and they want to go super fast. And I actually was really impressed. Someone in the press box was like, gosh, are you sure you want to do this for this game? But, like save this stuff but to me, it's like, you have to be able to do it and you have to work on it against real competition. And honestly, when you think about no false starts, I don't believe no false starts, no illegal formations, with a receiver not lining up. I mean, I thought operationally it was pretty impressive to come out and execute the offense like this. It was just that the actual passing and catching wasn't there. But I like the tempo, and I think they've done a good job of getting these guys to play that way. I also think, by the way, that Cooper Mays was a big loss early, and I think early after he went out, you could see the difference. I ended up figuring it out, and again, they were going to blow that team off the ball no matter what. But I think protection-wise, that hurt them. It sounds like he is okay, according to Heupel. They need him next week if they can get him back. That did not look good, getting rolled up on. It's like the offensive lineman's nightmare.
Yeah, looked bad on that play, and it was good to see him be able to kind of recover from that. But I will say, I mean, and I think we knew this, it's important for those 5 guys on the line to stay as healthy as possible this year. Look, it's a 12-game season. Somebody on that line is going to get hurt at some point. I mean, we know this. That's how college football works. But, those 5 guys, those are the best 5 they've got, and it's important to keep them as healthy as possible. And look, I mean, I thought, when you've got a guy like Joe Milton back there who can run, and we saw that last night, sometimes when you're going at the speed that they were going at last night, that's a lot to ask when you're asking to be blocking all over the field. Your quarterback's running out of the pocket. You're trying to block that way. Then you're running up to the line trying to snap the ball 3 seconds later. I mean, it's going to require some depth that eventually gets built at that offensive line position because, I mean, it's just physics. You're not going to be able to run that much as an offensive lineman all year and not have to come out every now and then. But I think it's pretty important for those five to stay healthy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Dane Davis is someone you feel like maybe in a pinch he could come in and help. Calvert did not play last night, so there's a guy who's played some football, and I don't know what his status is coming back, but no doubt. I mean, that starting five, and I think that starting five could be a pretty good line. I mean, I think that again, I've always thought Darnell Wright has the ability. I mean, he was a 5-star recruit for a reason, and I thought for the most part he did have one holding that killed, I think, the third or fourth drive with the holding penalty. But I thought he looked good. It's just, and they're going to see much better defenses ahead. I think they've got something there, but you're right. Like that spot, and then of course, inside linebacker. You cannot have injuries, Tennessee.
Especially at the linebacker spot. Good Lord. Can you imagine if they did? When we come back, we'll continue the conversation on the Vols, including why there was one part of last night's game that left me really encouraged for Tennessee as they move forward here. We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game.
Daddy's gonna light that rear end up when you get home, and you're waiting for him to get home from work.
That's right.
And it's kind of like, and you're real anxious, kind of like, you kind of dreading it happen. That's the way I feel right now. Now, don't get me wrong. The moment I hear Rocky Top and I see the tee open up, I'll get goosebumps and get a little teary-eyed.
That was our good friend Big Orange Mac from yesterday here on the program, who it was interesting to follow his Twitter account along last night. He got pretty excited early on Joe Rexrode, and then started to fade as the game went on a little bit.
So in the end, Big Orange Mac reverted back to childhood and getting the the butt bloodied by the switch.
That's right.
Watching Tennessee football.
That's right.
I can't follow Twitter too well, so he didn't tweet anything inappropriate, did he?
No, I don't think so. I didn't see it if he did.
Okay, good. Just stick to football, Big Orange Mac.
That's right. Let's go back to our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Devin from Dover texting in. These people making excuses for this crappy team are not real Tennessee fans. The 90s and early 2000 teams are where Tennessee should be, not being in the conversation with Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Kentucky, settling for mediocrity, the state of Tennessee sports motto. Devin's upset this morning.
We just can't get any, in-between opinions, can we? It's either I want the Natty again now, or come on, that's a huge blowout win. Let's be excited. Yay. I mean, it's a long way from that, Devin. You're right. But, didn't we know that? Don't we know that to me, if this team goes 6-6 or 7-5, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I understand that that's sad as a Tennessee fan, but if you've been following along closely, that's where things are.
Adam in Portland texting in. What I saw looked like a potentially fun no-huddle offense with players that can execute it. He'll get them there in a couple of years. Milton reminded me of Vince Young with that flat-footed 60-yard throw and with wildly overthrowing everyone as well. I would say Vince Young had a pretty good arm. Joe Milton's arm's better than Vince Young's. Joe Milton's got a laser.
Yeah, well, and Vince Young, the thing that Vince Young, he was incredible at escaping pressure and making plays that way, with his arm and his feet, but an incredible glider with the football. And that's, with Milton, like you said, that second touchdown, it's once he gets going, it cannot be easy to tackle him. But getting going, and I think some of it, again, is just deciding to go.
Yep.
The word is, I wrote it, the word is ponderous to me. Very big, fancy word.
You like that word.
I like the word. I probably use it too much, but I think it fit perfectly last night with some of and even almost confirming a receiver was open. And again, when you have an arm like that, you can do that more often. You can confirm he's open, and then you get that ball in so fast. But you gotta anticipate both things better.
There was one part of last night's game that I was pretty encouraged about, especially offensively when we got towards the end of the game. And it was apparent that the passing game was going to be a big topic of conversation today. And we've talked a lot about it. The execution was not there. There's going to be a lot they're going to have to work on over this next week or so before Pittsburgh comes to town if they want to win that game. And I think everybody would agree with that. I thought, to your point, the operation was really good. I thought the play calling feel was pretty good too. It felt like Josh Heupel and Alex Golish know what they're doing offensively, which is, as you know, Joe, a massive step in the right direction compared to what we saw this time a year ago offensively for Tennessee. I liked the aggressiveness that they displayed last night. I think that's something we knew was a part of Josh Heupel and his DNA as they came into this season. But you could feel when they had Bowling Green on their heels running the ball, they stuck with it, and they just kept going and going and going. And obviously they wanted to work on the passing game last night. That became more and more obvious as the game went on and as the score started to separate a little bit. I liked the aggressiveness of Josh Heupel. I think that's the way this team is going to have to play this year. Regardless of what the execution looks like from a talent perspective, they're not at a place where they can just be conservative like we saw all year last year and think you're going to have any shot to win when SEC play comes around. I liked what I saw from a stylistic approach last night by the coaching staff.
Yeah. By the way, that brings up a big fail. And there's as you know, there's a whole bunch of people who are at the Tennessee Vols press conferences. Titans press conferences, you probably have 10, 12 people in there asking questions. I mean, you're pushing 30 at these. And none of us asked who called plays last night. They talk about that on the broadcast at all? I
don't think so. No.
Yeah. So I guess that's a question for next week. But I agree with you. Now I do think that when they went scripted, beginning of both halves, I mean, it was really good. And obviously, the first drive of the third quarter was very clearly, you know what? Let's see if they can tackle us one time running the ball. It's 14-6, which is freaking ridiculous. Let's make it 21-6. That's what they did. But I really liked. Again, I liked the play calling. I agree. I liked going at that tempo, and I think that's what they have to lean in on. I mean, they've got to be able to catch defenses, even though defenses in college football are much better equipped for this. This has been copycatted over and over. Heupel goes way back with this scheme. I mean, he's been doing this a long time, and this is what he is what he does. And I again, like operationally, I was impressed. You just have to execute. I think the plays are there to be made, and there will be plays to be made against better teams. It's just that the windows are going to be smaller, and you've got to let it rip right now and not expect that you're going to be able to make a sandwich in the pocket anymore this year.
Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Brandon from Georgia texting in. Joe Milton has all the talent in the world, but for some reason on game day he just can't put it together. The reason Michigan didn't want him was for that simple thing. He looks great in practice, but not on game day. I say he will lose his job by midseason.
Well, maybe earlier than that, Brandon.
Could be.
I mean, honestly, next week, if he plays like he did when he went, I want to say he missed 9 straight passes over a long period of time.
Yeah.
If he plays like that for a half against Pittsburgh and they're losing, I mean, I think right then he may get swapped out. It's possible. I mean, that's the thing. Joe Milton is QB1, but this is not some huge gap overall, I don't think, between him and the other two guys. So that's the good thing about having QB depth is that you can make a switch. And I think, again, I thought Hooker in the spring showed some good things running this offense. So, look, Joe Milton may learn from this film and come out and light Pittsburgh up, and we'll have a totally different discussion, the following week. But I don't know that if he doesn't do that, then I don't think midseason I think it'll be earlier than that.
Luke on the text line. Fans who are mad the Vols didn't score a touchdown every possession after losing the amount of talent they did are ridiculous. I mean, there's a complete 180-degree difference in play style and outcome last night than the previous 3 years. There is a difference in play style. I mean, look, the outcome, it is what it is. Bowling Green legitimately might be the worst team in college football. They're awful. I mean, I thought that they were a part of their playbook last night was to have an illegal substitution penalty. I mean, they had an illegal they had 12 men on the field coming out of a timeout. I don't know that I've ever seen that.
I like that, though. The Hail Mary, try to sneak in that 12th guy.
Yeah.
What the heck?
I was just like, oh, okay. There you go.
No, they're awful.
They're terrible. So, look, I get the sentiment from Luke. I really do. Tennessee, look, every win Tennessee can get this year, you'll take if you're a Tennessee fan. I don't think there's any question about that. But, again, it's keeping the bigger picture in mind. I can't prove it, obviously, but if they played in the passing game the way they played last night against Pittsburgh or against Missouri or against Kentucky, they're losing all those games. They just are. So that is the bigger picture. It has very little, in my opinion, to do with the result last night. It's forecasting where this offense is right now and what that means as they move forward when you're not playing basically a high school football team like they were last night.
Yeah. Ron on the text line says, Milton needs speedy receivers, run under the balls, catch him, and Tennessee's, play to his strength. And, the thing is, I feel like probably the worst situations last night were when it was 3rd and long and you knew they had to throw.
Yeah.
Those were, obviously, so you want to keep defenses off balance. Again, I think the QB run element as a design thing, as an intentional thing, has to be a part of the offense against good teams. You have to have that threat and you have to use it. And you want to get quick access throws for him, but there's just going to be some times where it's 3rd and 9 and you have to drop back and you have to see the protections and you have to make a throw into a tight space. And if you can't do that at a much better rate than what last night suggested, then I agree with you. There's going to be some long Saturdays. Also last night doesn't doesn't guarantee that that's how it's going to go, but
Sure.
just there's a massive amount of improvement. You think about what Heupel said last night after the game. I promise you, the actual internal evaluation of Milton, the film, is going to be very, very critical and pointed because they know he's got to be much, much better than this.
We'll continue to take your thoughts all show long on the Vols on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. When we come back, we will switch gears and get into the Titans. Some more roster moves made yesterday by the Titans, including another player that was released. We'll get into all that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 2 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Sponsored by Volunteer State Bank. Real people, real solutions right here. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Got Call Your Shot Friday coming up later this hour at 7:45. So we'll take your bold predictions in the world of sports. Maybe a little college football action coming up this weekend on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. By the way, Joe, we've not talked about this yet. I thought we might see a little boat rowing last night for a little while from PJ Fleck in Minnesota. They looked good early on, and then late in that game, got away from them. Ohio State wins by 14.
I'm not going to lie. I was covering the Tennessee game, but Ubben had the Buckeyes and the Gophers on that phone streaming, and, man, that looked real interesting for a while. And, the trash I would have talked to Jared had PJ Fleck pulled that off. Would have been blistering. Either way, I think they acquitted themselves pretty well. But of course, Ohio State ends up covering too and showing it. They've got so many guys. They're eventually going to be ridiculously good. But yeah, that was very close to interesting. And then I didn't see it, but Ibrahim, they're running, who's really good. It looks like an Achilles. Is that right?
Yeah. It's not good.
That's awful because he's special.
Yeah,
and he's a really good player. So that's just terrible to see. It was cool to see what looked like a wild environment in Minneapolis at what's actually a really cool stadium. But dude couldn't quite pull it off.
That's right. And UCF, the Gus Bus last night making his debut. Game got delayed by weather. They were down by 21 in the game, and Gus comes back. They get it done.
Totally lost track of that game, and I'm like, it's 21-zip. Oh, Gus. Oh, no, Gus. And then I see they came back to win, so all right. Good for you,
Did you see his comment?
No.
He was like, we are the future of college football.
Oh, I did see that. Yeah, they came out with like this big video about how UCF's the future of college football. He said all the traditional programs going to go by the wayside and be UCF.
That adds up.
Yes, it does. By the way, I don't know if Gus has like stopped dyeing his hair or what's going on there, but looks a little different out there. Kind of an old man vibe to him. I liked it. Little Gus Bus down there getting things done in Central Florida.
So is it because like since he had to be rivals with Saban, who must like just double the stock of Just for Men every year with his coloring of his hair? So maybe Gus got away from that. Like, you know what? I'm just going to be au naturel now.
Maybe so. I don't know. I liked it from Gus Malzahn last night. So the former UCF coach gets a win in Knoxville, and the current UCF coach getting a win last night against Boise State. Some moves made yesterday, Joe, on the Titans front. Darrington Evans, Marcus Johnson, and Daniel Munyer all placed on injured reserve yesterday by the Titans. Nick Dzubnar activated from the COVID-19 list, and tight end Luke Stocker waived from the active roster yesterday. So Luke Stocker waived by the Titans. Dzubnar coming off of the reserve COVID-19 list. Do you think Dzubnar is going to ultimately make this team, and he's going to be a part of things once the 53-man roster is set?
I don't know. I would guess no. I would guess they're just going to roll with the 4 inside backers, but certainly he'd be the 5th. And if he is on the team, it's a special teams reason for that, and that's always a possibility. But I mean, you're going to have to take away from somewhere. I do think we're going to see, at least a couple defensive backs go, but I wouldn't think so. I would think now that, I think the Mekhi Sargent comments we were trying to analyze add up, because now I think you're going to see McNichols on the roster, and I think you're going to see Mekhi Sargent both on the roster to start. With Sargent basically as more Derrick Henry's, backup.
Yeah. With
McNichols on the field in third down situations. That would be my guess at this point. Tough for Darrington Evans. And of course it's good the rules now. It only has to be a 3-week IR, so it may not be long, but also tough for Marcus Johnson.
Yeah.
Who I believe in the first game, I believe he was wide receiver 3 in my eyes, even beyond Chester Rogers, a guy who was primed to make plays for this offense. And now the question is, so who is? I mean, I think Rogers slides into that next spot, but is Josh Reynolds ready? If not, is it Nick Westbrook-Akina, who is on the field. Is it Cam Batson? You know, there's an interesting sort of group here and how it's all sort of stacked up after Marcus Johnson. Now they start after the big two, of course. That's going to be interesting. That's too bad for Marcus Johnson. I still think also that he can matter this year.
So what about Luke Stocker being waived yesterday? Obviously, we discussed it. Michael Pruitt back with the Titans, at least on their practice squad at the moment. Do you think there could be a spot for Michael Pruitt on the active roster for the Titans at some point?
Maybe. I mean, maybe they've decided that the former tight end that they prefer on the roster is Michael Pruitt to Luke Stocker. Are they going to go? I mean, they're not going to go with three, right?
I don't think so.
3 on the active roster. I mean, they've cut Forrestall and Pinckney, so at this point, Hudson, Swaim, Ferkser. I mean, my guess right now would be Pruitt. So for the people in the text line the other day saying, "What about Michael Pruitt?" And I was like, "Well, they already passed on him." Well, there you go. They passed on him, but that doesn't mean that you have to keep passing on him. Just like I still am surprised from a year ago when they cut Corey Levin, and now they've managed to get him back here, which I think is a nice pickup for them.
I think it is too. I guess it's just what was the holdup? If ultimately Michael Pruitt ends up on this roster, and we'll see whether or not he does, because if he doesn't, it's a moot point at that point. But if he does, what was the holdup in the offseason? Was Michael Pruitt looking for too much money? Did he want a different opportunity? Like what happened for it to ultimately get back to this point? If it is Michael Pruitt end up being on the roster, and why was, I guess, an agreement not reached earlier in the offseason if you're the Titans?
Well, it seems obvious to me that they barely want him on their roster.
Yeah.
I mean, so I think they're trying to upgrade and determine that Stocker wasn't it. But look, it could also be another name. I have not seen. I mean, people throwing out Tanner Hudson.
Yeah,
he's interesting. Could it be someone else other than Pruitt? I don't know, but I mean, they let him walk. San Francisco ultimately didn't want him. To me, it makes sense based on how he played previously here, how he knows the offense. He can come right in and play. But I'm guessing it was just that they were hoping to upgrade, and they just haven't been able to find one. Maybe if Briley Moore were healthy, he'd be the 4th tight end right now. I don't know.
By the way, it looks like Tanner Hudson is signed with the 49ers practice squad. So out in San Francisco for Tanner Hudson.
Well, there you go. So I don't know who else is out there who might be more interesting than Michael Pruitt. It seems to make total sense at this point to have him be the 4th guy.
It does. It's going to be really interesting as guys continue to come off the COVID list to see what the corresponding moves are. And I agree with you. With Darrington Evans on IR, I mean, it's going to be Henry Sargent and Jeremy McNichols at some point as well, at least to start the season, which, obviously, I think from Evans' point of view, and we'll get a little bit more into this coming up in the next segment, but Darrington Evans is a guy where I thought if he could remain healthy this year, could be kind of a change of pace for them. Not necessarily even in the running game as much, even though I thought he would get some opportunities there. But I thought he could really develop into an interesting weapon in the passing game as well. And unfortunate for him that here we are yet again with Darrington Evans, albeit only in his 2nd year, and injuries once again are the story to begin the season.
Yeah, it's and sometimes that just carries on through a player's career. They're just well, look, what percentage of human bodies can actually take any of this from this league? I mean, you got to be pretty darn durable to even get into the league. So, but there are a lot of guys who are fine in college football, and then it's just different at the NFL level. And this could just be a couple situations of bad luck for someone who's never going to have injuries again and play 10 years in the league. But it's too bad because I mean, Darrington Evans in camp, and even very early in that Atlanta game, he just has a burst that I really think they were going to, and they may yet still utilize. He's like, I get the appeal with him. He has a gear that not a lot of guys have, and it's a really nice contrast, I think, to Henry. So we'll see. In the meantime, I wouldn't be surprised if Mekhi Sargent gets a few carries early in the season. I think he's demonstrated. I mean, he's a hard runner. I think he's got nice vision. He seems to run well within the scheme. So he's probably going to get a little bit of an opportunity here.
Go to theGameNashville.com/deals to check out Nashville's best deals. Save cash with a purchase of a $50 gift card for Fat Cat Slims for only $25. A vibrant mid-century American bar and restaurant inspired by custom culture and retro vibes is located at 730 8th Avenue South in the Gulch. It's the spot for live music, diner classics, and the best cocktails you can ask for. Other deals include half off a $25 gift card for Joyland in East Nashville, and you can also purchase a $30 gift card to Central Barbecue for only $15. Get your deal now while they last at theGameNashville.com/deals. We'll continue the conversation on the Titans when we come back. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Later this morning, it's your chance to participate in the Nashville SC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. If you guess correctly which player scores a goal in the game tonight, you win a prize pack and a 4-pack of tickets to an upcoming Nashville SC home game. We'll have that opportunity for you coming up a little bit later today at 9:45. Welcome back in. Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, presented by Volunteer State Bank. Visit our brand new Murfreesboro location at 2019 Memorial Boulevard, now with 2 locations in Murfreesboro. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic, intern Will here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, talking Titans. Taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. So, Joe, we mentioned Darrington Evans on the injured reserve list to begin the season. Marcus Johnson on the list as well. 2 guys that I was really excited to see in the offense this year, and hopefully we'll still see at some point as they continue to move forward here. At what point, if you're John Robinson, Mike Vrabel, and the Titans, is the Darrington Evans injury concern a real problem for you? Obviously, you want to see him on the field. You picked him in the 3rd round last year, and I think everybody believes that he's got a lot of ability that he brings to the table. But as we know, and as Mike Vrabel talks about all the time, the greatest ability is availability, and Darrington Evans has not been all that available so far in his NFL career. Are we already there with the concern level if you're J-Rob and Mike Vrabel? How do you think they view Darrington Evans at this moment?
Well, I think you have to go about your business and say, okay, who's available? Right, in this league as a coach, you can't ponder on it too much. Word of the day. You can't be too ponderous about it. And look, if your offensive line is healthy and you got right tackle figured out, and you got number 11, number 2 out there, you got number 22 out there, it could easily be forgotten that you don't have Darrington Evans, So I do think that, and of course, even like before they signed Julio, I thought one of the pathways to this offense, building on last year, maybe in some ways being better, was like Evans as a real threat. But at this point, you did find a nice reserve running back in Mekhi Sargent. That's a nice find. And, McNichols can, pick up a blitz for you. So give it to 22, throw it to 2 and 11, and you might just be okay.
Yeah, I think they might be okay on that front too, but got to stay healthy in that. It would be nice, though, 3rd round pick from last year. Get a little value out of that pick. Got to start getting some value out of some of these draft picks at some point.
No question. Well, look, at Christian Fulton, the 2nd round pick from last year, big year for him. And I feel like he has – and there's a guy who was banged up last year a lot too. And so far, that hasn't been an issue. He's been out there available, taking all the reps, and I think playing pretty well. And I think they could have something there. And I thought they were going to have something with Evans, and maybe they still will, but it's just it's not great. It's still weird too, like what the injury is. I swear the replay is like, that is a hamstring, but you'd probably rather have it a hamstring than a knee injury that's kept him out this long now. I mean, he's been out, well, I guess 3 weeks at this point. So what does that mean? Like how long? So now we know it's a 3-week IR. So how serious is this? I don't know, but you don't like hearing knees and knowing that it's going well past a month.
So, Joe, I asked Emily Proud from News 2 this question yesterday, and am interested to get your response on it as well. As we sit a little bit more than a week now from week 1 for the Titans against Arizona coming up next Sunday, what is the most intriguing part of this team for you as the Titans head into the regular season? What are you most, looking forward to coming up in week 1 to maybe figuring out about this team, or what's the most thing you're going to be paying attention to the most coming up in the next week or so?
I mean, I wish I could be original, like I wish I could say, man, I really can't wait in the sub package to see like where Danico Autry lines up or something like that. But
I am looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, sure. And I will say that a close second for me is Bud Dupree, just Bud Dupree on his own. Like, what is he as a player? Does he change this defense? How much does he add to this defense? He's got to add a lot. But I mean, I've got to go with just this offense. I mean, even if they had been playing together a lot this preseason, I think that'd be the answer. It's like, okay, let's see him against real teams. But I think the fact that they haven't makes it even more like, it's going to be Christmas morning on September 12th. Like, let's see what it looks like. Real game, some good players on the other side of the ball. Tannehill throwing it around to those two guys, Henry, and then do they get loose some of these support players, a Ferkser, Chester, whoever else, maybe, get some big plays because all those guys are on the field. How are they going to get defended? I mean, week to week, I can't wait to see just what other teams are doing, because I think a lot of teams are going to be like, we just can't let Derrick Henry run. You can't do it. But my gosh, are you not afraid of what that means? If you put too many resources into that, it's just going to be, and I'm sure we'll see all kinds of different things. And if those guys are all healthy, and again, I think right tackle, can you have someone over there who's okay? Is the whole offensive line going to be back and all ready to go after missing so much time? But if all that does go your way, if you're the Titans, it's going to be fascinating to see what defenses do with these guys.
Well, and I agree with all that. I think I'm most interested to see what does the pass rush look like, not only in week one against real competition, but against that quarterback specifically, which it's such a different challenge with Kyler Murray, because not only do you want to close in and try to capture him in the backfield, but you also got to make sure in this case that you don't over pursue. I mean, Mike Vrabel talked about it yesterday. He can bust one out 70 yards on you if you're not careful. So this is kind of an interesting first week for this new Titans defense of Kyler Murray, not only with the passing threat that he brings to the table, but anytime you got a guy at quarterback that can pull it down and run, especially with the effectiveness that Kyler Murray has, it's always interesting to me to see how you handle that from a pass rush perspective, because the last thing you want is Bud Dupree and Harold Landry just blowing by people on the line, and then all of a sudden Kyler Murray says, okay, thank you, I'm just going to run that way. And it's going to be interesting to see how Shane Bowen and the Titans handle that.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys that you can do everything exactly like you're supposed to do it, and then you still just gave up a big chunk play. And that was an interesting thing, too. Vrabel talking a little bit about the Cardinals. I mean, I think he was asked just about Kyler Murray, and he went through the whole roster the other day.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say he's watched a little bit of film on the Cardinals, but he said it actually shocks you when you see the arm strength and some of the throws that Kyler Murray can make. He's been inconsistent. I'd say that last year he was very up and down. And at times, I watched a fair amount of them last year, and at times it wasn't clicking. But boy, when he gets going, it is almost like watching a shortstop just fire it in, to first base. I mean, he's fun to watch. And yeah, the Titans saw a little bit of that QB run game in the preseason and how it can be problematic for you. So, I mean, you have that, and then you just have the guy downfield. That basically you can throw it near him and he'll probably come away with the ball. And then we haven't even gotten to Rondale Moore.
That's right. And we'll have all week next week to get to Rondale Moore, because it's going to take probably a week to get to all the things that he can bring to the table. But I will say, Joe, I mean, after dealing with Felipe Franks in the preseason, Kyler Murray, kind of not much on the running scale compared to him, right?
Hey, I thought Franks looked pretty good running around. And, hey, Felipe Franks, there's an example, by the way, of a quarterback where if you just measured, all the physical ability, I mean, it's pretty good. Yeah. I mean, he's got a huge arm, big, strong, runs around, not consistent as a passer. So, I mean, I think a little bit of Joe Milton when I think of Felipe Franks, by the way.
I don't know if Tennessee fans want to hear that, but hey, I hear what you're saying on the physical tools front for sure when it comes to Felipe Franks. When we come back, we'll get into what's been an interesting developing story this week that Jared Stillman added a little context to yesterday as well regarding a Titans superstar player on offense. We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, brought to you by Volunteer State Bank. Visit our brand new Mount Juliet location at 11400 Lebanon Road. Volunteer State Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Joe Rexrode, Michelle has changed up the vibe here on the show. It's some good tunes coming back in, a Friday tradition here now on the show.
We are working for the weekend.
That's right.
I was wondering where we get some Loverboy going in here. By the way, Drake's new album is like certified Loverboy or something. So even Drake is on the Loverboy train. So
that is on today's to-do list. Listen to the entire album.
Didn't know he came out with a new one.
Last night, Robby, come on. Got to get on your pop culture train.
I'd rather be on any other train. It's cool. I'm
totally. How about a pedal tavern?
I'd rather be on a pedal tavern. Totally cool being off that train. That's for sure. Joe, there's been an interesting discussion this week, both from Jeff Schultz at The Athletic and our good friend Jared Stillman added to it a little bit yesterday on his show as well, regarding Julio Jones and what his demeanor has been like in his last couple of years with the Falcons, and now maybe what the Titans can expect as they move forward into year one with Julio Jones here. And we discussed briefly yesterday the piece that Schultz came out with, where Arthur Blank in that piece, who of course is the owner of the Falcons, basically described Julio Jones and talked about his inability to practice, rubbing the coaching staff and the front office of the Falcons the wrong way, and that was ultimately one of the reasons why the Falcons ended up moving on from Julio Jones at that point. And then Jared yesterday on his show talked to some sources down in Atlanta, and basically what Jared talked about yesterday on his show was the guy that showed up in 2011 in Atlanta from Julio Jones and the guy in 2020, not the same player. And Julio Jones did not want to practice. Jared even said yesterday at some points Julio Jones did not want to play in the game, and that, again, it's just not the same guy that came into the league in terms of the work ethic, the ability to practice, the desire to practice on that front as well. Joe Rexrode, what is kind of your reaction to this if you're a Titans fan and you hear this both from Jeff Schultz and then yesterday from Jared Stillman as well? What's your concern level about Julio Jones as we head into this season where he has not really been on the practice field as of late? How do you kind of read into this situation that's come up this week regarding Julio Jones?
Well, I wouldn't call it like a huge red flag. I think that the Arthur Blank comments weren't all that surprising, but he put it on the record and he talked pretty openly and frankly about it. And yeah, I mean, Jared and I talked a little bit yesterday too, and I heard some similar things. And I would characterize it this way: Julio Jones, good teammate in Atlanta, and in the last few years, not as beloved by coaches and execs in that organization as he was by the players.
No.
Still haven't heard anything where where he was like bad, quote unquote, like bad in the locker room. But if you don't ever practice, I mean, sometimes that happens for guys because they are banged up and they are just trying to get healthy to the next Sunday. And then we saw that with a few different Titans players last year. It happens in the league. If you're healthy and you're just like, I don't want to practice, you can see how coaches wouldn't like that. I can certainly see how Mike Vrabel would not like that moving forward. So I just wonder how much of all this stuff goes to the whole contract thing. For whatever reason, and of course we know Julio Jones got a big deal, and then he immediately wanted the deal redone, and there were bad feelings both ways and all that stuff. How much was all that a part of what happened afterward? Right. I would have to assume some. I would also think that Julio Jones here in Nashville, given all that, given the conversation, I mean, honestly, if I'm a Titans fan, I don't mind that story came out this week, because it's sort of like, well, this is what they're saying about you, Julio. So what are you going to do about it? Obviously, if you're a Titans fan, or if you're in the Titans organization, you want him to come out and just unleash hell on people starting week one. So I don't think it's a big concern, but I also think that if that's what he's going to do, long term here, I think Mike Vrabel, well, first of all, any coach believes that practice matters.
Sure.
Because it does. Because what you do in practice, I mean, you are specifically practicing plays that you're then going to try to execute Sunday. But I think Vrabel, maybe more than some, is a bit. I sense frustration at times with lack of availability from some players. Not that he doesn't understand injury, but I'm just saying, he clearly finds it very important. And so, long term, I guess I could see that being a problem. I also think it comes down to so much. People asked Julio when he came here about, okay, well, A.J. Brown's over there, and you got Derrick Henry. Like, are you going to get the ball enough? To me, if they're winning, then I think everything's going to be fine. If they're losing or they're not playing, we're not winning enough as much as expected, and you got some weeks where Julio has 2 catches for 17 yards, okay, well then let's see how that goes from there.
What also does that change at any point in this new setting, in the new environment? Like if Julio Jones is healthy to begin the season and he's practicing every day and every week, then that conversation starts to go away. Now, before all this came out with Jeff Schultz and from Jared yesterday, after the Titans picked up Julio Jones, you and I talked about he doesn't practice very much. He just doesn't. He finds his way onto the injury report, and typically, other than last year when he was hurt after 9 games, he finds a way to be out there on Sundays, and he plays, and he's productive. But there's not been a whole lot of practice for Julio Jones the last couple of years. If you told me right now that was going to be the case here this year with the Titans, but he was going to play 15 out of 17 weeks or 16 out of 17 weeks, whatever the case may be, I don't really know that I care all that much. As long as he goes out there and he's productive, then I don't really care whether or not Julio Jones practices or not. What I think starts to become a concern and what I'd be interested to really dig into is, all right, if it's not practicing because you're injured, that's one thing. If it's not practicing just because you don't feel like practicing and you're maybe just not willing to go out there and put in that work, that's when at some point that's going to affect the way you play on the field on Sundays, and that's not a good thing if you're a Titans fan.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I mean, it's it's one of those things where it's just like, well, I'm a star and I don't really need to practice. You probably lose some plays on Sundays because of that, And look, how much have we asked about the Tannehill Julio Jones connection? Man, I feel like it's important this year, but it's also important to remember that he did come out in the spring, and then he came out in camp, and on the second straight day of practicing, and I'm saying, fully practicing in team, he hurt something, So, I mean, if a guy is on an exercise bike during practice, that doesn't mean he's just decided he doesn't want to practice. That means he's got something that he's trying to work out, working with the strength coach to try to get back on the field. So now that we can't watch practice, now we can only watch the beginning of practice.
Yep.
It's hard to say, but he was out there this week doing the individual drills. So it may be a case where he simply had a little injury and they're never going to push that, and you never want him to. Like you said, can he be out there Sundays most weeks or all weeks? And is he somewhat the player that he's been? Okay, then don't practice. So I don't know. We'll wait and see. I just have to think that some of these things stem from the bad feelings with him in the front office. And it seems like the coaches were kind of caught in the crossfire on that. And it also is pretty obvious that, that they didn't think it would be great for Arthur Smith trying to establish this new era, for Julio Jones to be part of that. So you're hoping with the Titans, it's just this clean slate thing, and he's hearing all the talk about this stuff, and he comes out and plays like Julio Jones. That's what matters.
Let's go back to the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Adam in Portland texting in. To give you an idea of how pathetic my fandom is with the Titans, I still remember how excited I was when we signed Carl Pickens, and the thought of Thigpen, Pickens, and Dyson on the field fired me up. Then he couldn't stay healthy, ended up with D-Mace and Chris Sanders starting. So while I'm excited for Julio, things change, so I'm trying to taper my excitement off some. Craig texting in saying, if all that is true, I hope it's simply because he was tired of having losing seasons after losing season, with the exception of the Super Bowl meltdown year. Not saying losing gives you the right to act that way, but the wide receiver position has the stereotype of being divas for a reason.
Yeah, well, yeah, stereotype is a good word for that. And that word. Jared says on a text line, I think you guys are missing the biggest part. The coming out of the games in big situations, including plays designed for him, is concerning. And yeah, there was a, and I didn't get to hear Jared's segment yesterday. I was heading over to the Neyland Stadium, but he told me one of the stories about that, which was definitely a weird story.
Yeah.
One thing I don't know, and Jared, if you know, you can text me again on my text line. Like, what was their record? What was the situation with the team at the time? But yeah, I mean, if there's a trick play or something that's designed for you, and then you don't realize it and run off the field, like, huh? I mean, sure. I mean, it doesn't sound great. It sounds like there was a lot of frustration with him in Atlanta. I will repeat that. I think what happens sometimes with guys is that their teammates have resentment, and then that gets bad. Right. And I have not heard that, which is good. I can tell you, like, right here, from what I can tell, A.J. Brown and Julio Jones are absolutely best friends. It's like the movie Step Brothers.
Yeah.
They're inseparable. So, I mean, I think most of the signs have been positive in that way. We'll see. But, yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, that's a weird story. Like, why, if there was a play designed for you and it's, like, called something that's for you and then you don't go out for it, but I mean, we're also talking years ago, right? Like, how many times did this happen? To me, it's a very small red flag at this point and could be completely meaningless.
Coming up next, it's time for Call Your Shot Friday here on Robby and Rexrode. We need your bold predictions in the world of sports on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. College football underway this weekend. That's where a lot of my called shots will be. We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025, The Game.
sports weekend has arrived. You know what that means.
Shoot your shot.
It's time for Call Your Shot Friday with Robby and Rexrode on ESPN 1025 The Game and The Game Nashville app.
And it is that time of the week, time for Call Your Shot Friday. And it's a special edition of Call Your Shot Friday because college football is back. And it's the first full weekend of college football here in the 2021 season. And with that in mind, Joe Rexrode, I was not here last week for Call Your Shot Friday. I was riding rides and doing all the Disney World stuff last week. Do we have an update from last week's edition of Call Your Shot Friday here on the show?
Yes. So let's go to. Well, Elijah stepped in for you.
Correct.
Gosh, see, Elijah does all the long-term stuff. So let's all remember this. Memphis will make the Sweet 16.
He already made college basketball called shots.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Elijah doesn't know next time he'll get to call a shot, right?
That's true.
So, hey, got to call those shots when you can call them.
All right.
And also, it's nice to get some Memphis hoops in for you, Jared. I hope you're still listening.
Yeah.
Georgia will win the SEC in football. I think he's saying football, right? I mean, maybe that's basketball too. I don't know.
I'm gonna hope.
I would hope it's football.
I think it's football. And then the Reds will seal the deal and be in the playoffs.
Okay.
So, Ian Anderson with a no-hitter Sunday. I love that's calling a shot.
Yeah.
I mean, that is calling a shot. Didn't happen. Yankees will lose tonight. I don't know. Did you get that right? I have no idea.
I think I got it wrong. I need to double check, but I really wish they lost.
You could have said you could have said that you got it right, and we would have believed you. But
I got it right. Okay.
All right, there we go. And also, you have Kentucky football going 9-4 this year, which includes the bowl win. So 9 wins, 8-4 in the regular season. 9-4.
Right.
I had Mekhi Sargent will make the 53. Hello. I think I'm going to be right on that. I mean, I know.
You were right.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. But I'm saying I think I'll be right even when it's the quote-unquote real 53 and everybody comes off the COVID list.
All right.
Real quick, by the way, we haven't talked about this. No one added to that list yesterday.
Yep.
So that's significant. Another called shot. Ola Adeniyi will get a sack of Justin Fields. A ding, ding, ding. Feeling pretty good about that one. So 2 for 2.
As a half sack. Does that count?
Yes.
Okay.
It freaking counts.
I was just asking.
He got there first. Roberson got in there and got that half sack, but that was Ola's sack. Then I had Joe Milton will start Thursday. Yes. Joe Milton will have 2 TDs passing. No. Joe Milton will throw a pick. No. Joe Milton will have 1 rushing touchdown. Well, yes, but he actually had 2. So I was in the neighborhood there. But
you were.
Yeah. So.
By the way, I think we need to. I think Ryan Porth wants us to have a parade because he got his called shot of Tim Tebow being on the SEC network correct by the Tennessee game. So way to go, Ryan Porth.
Way to go. Clap for him. Good job.
He was really adamant about that last night. That's right. Want to make sure we acknowledge that here on the show. So with that in mind, Michelle Knezovic, would you like to kick us off in this week's edition of Call Your Shot Friday?
So, Joe, I already informed Robby that these shots I'm calling are kind of out of pocket this morning. The coffee's kicked in. We're just going to throw some big predictions out there.
Nice. Okay.
So, college football. We're starting with college football. I'm going to say Western Michigan beats Michigan.
Oh, yeah. Come on.
Big shot. Little in-state rivalry.
I like it.
So let's hope that happens. Because I think I don't think I've hit any shots yet. So I'm going to say, another one I have. Okay, another college football. We've got Clemson, Georgia tomorrow.
Correct.
I'm going to say Clemson wins and Georgia doesn't score until the second half.
Wow.
Ooh.
I like that.
How do you feel about that, Kirby Smart?
Oh, boy, if that's the case, I mean, he will be Twitter fired before he comes out for the third quarter kickoff. I promise you that.
There will be major Kirby Smart gifts if that happens.
Yes.
Next, USA men's soccer. They're playing in Nissan Stadium this weekend. I'm going to say they beat Canada in a shootout 2-1.
I like it.
And lastly, this one is very big for the program. Joe Rexrode, you haven't been informed yet, but next Sunday, September 12th, the Last Sounds home game. I will be throwing out the first pitch.
Yes.
And I'm going to say that I get in the strike zone-ish. How about that?
So it could potentially be called a strike.
Depending on the ump.
So no bouncing.
No bouncing.
There can't
Listen,
be any bouncing.
how about this? It's going over the plate. I'm not going to necessarily say a solid strike. Could be in the ball zone, but my stepdad is a baseball coach, and he called me and he told me not to disappoint the family.
No
So
pressure.
we will not be disappointing the family. Those are my
right.
shots for today.
Very nice.
Okay, now I wanted one more on that. Are you going to go from the mound or no?
Heck yes.
Okay.
Joe.
Okay, I like it.
Listen,
it.
go big or go home. You got to risk it to get the biscuit,
That's right. Already a step ahead of Chase McCabe on that regard. No question about
That's right. Chase was no mound and bounce.
That's
But
right.
again, Chase, we're not mad at you.
No,
Chase,
we're not
mad at you.
No, you did a
We're
great
fine.
job, Chase. Joe
We're fine with it,
Rexrode. Today's edition of Call Your Shot Friday from Joe Rexrode.
Okay, and yeah, I'm keeping it college football all the way. So it's hard to find a lot of called shots, with Vanderbilt, ETSU. However, here's one: Will Shepard will have more than 150 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns.
Okay.
Will Shepard, who, going into the spring, 4th receiver at best. I think he's a breakout star for Vanderbilt. He was great all through camp. He was the star of the spring game. Watch out for him. Davian Davis, we've talked a lot about him during the preseason. He's a captain. He's the leader of that team. I'm going to put him down for 2 sacks. I don't think he's going to be a big sack guy this year. He's an interior defensive lineman. But in this game, he's going to get a couple sacks against that ETSU offensive line.
All right.
UCLA will straight up beat LSU.
Wow.
And I don't even know what the line is right now. But, it's unfortunate, obviously, way unfortunate beyond football, what people in Louisiana or in the Gulf Coast area are dealing with. It has also been disruptive to that football team. And so, it's not I don't know. Is that a huge shot? I guess I thought LSU would be favored by a little bit more.
They're favored by 2.5.
2.5. But, I'm calling that shot. It's kind of a mini shot. Give me one more. Give me one more here. Florida State will shock the Fighting Irish on Sunday.
Wow.
Mike Norvell, Florida State. All of a sudden, they're talking new era after a shocker of Brian Kelly and the Clark Lelis Fighting Irish.
That's right. Wow. Florida State getting it done coming up against Notre Dame, according to Joe Rexrode. I'll go quickly here. I've heard this song and dance, and people, even on the broadcast last night, they're trying to convince me that Miami's going to keep this close against Alabama. No, they're not. The Tide will win by 28+ in this game. Alabama wins by 28 points or more in this game against Miami. They're going to throttle the Hurricanes coming up over the weekend. I think Georgia beats Clemson, and I think Georgia beats Clemson on the final drive. JT Daniels leads a game-winning drive in the final minutes to beat Clemson coming up on Saturday. Ken Seals throws 4 touchdowns against ETSU. It has to be 4 on the dot. Nashville SC tonight scores in the opening 10 minutes of the game. Opening 10 minutes of the game, a goal for Nashville SC tonight. Those are my called shots of the week.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, that's it feels like there's so much skepticism, and I've got it too, about Georgia. I think they might be the better team this year than Clemson. And yet like Georgia right now feels like Clemson when we used to talk about Clemsoning.
That's right.
In the big games.
Matt on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. The Hurricanes upset the Tide by 7. Good luck with that.
That's a shot.
Clemson beats Georgia by 14. And also bringing my daughter Ella to work with him today. She loves the show. Shout out to Ella.
What's up, Ella?
What's going on, Ella?
Hey,
Appreciate
Ella.
you taking time for listening.
Shout out to Ella.
I got Tim from Lewisburg on the text line. My called shot is I will get top 3 in the Robby and Rexrode Fantasy Football League. I'm signed up and am Rexrode versus Soda. So, Tim, once again, taking umbrage with your soda.
Next
and calling it hot.
Wednesday. Next Wednesday's our draft.
That's right.
Top 3. Come on. If you're going to call a shot, call top 1. Don't give me this top 3 crap.
Chris texting in, bold prediction, Joe steps in dog pee or poo in his house this weekend. So, Chris, taking a different approach to Call Your Shot Friday.
That's not calling a shot. I'm sorry, that's not calling a shot.
Jordan texting in.
Unfortunately
not. Jordan texting in, North Carolina will win the ACC and the Colts will beat the Seahawks opening weekend. So, North Carolina winning the ACC and the Colts, taking down Russell Wilson and the Seahawks on opening weekend in the NFL.
Doing some NFL shots already.
Guys, I have one more. I have one more real quick.
Okay.
Dak Prescott will not play on Thursday against the Bucs.
Okay.
Really?
I'm just calling it.
All right.
Like, is there any indication that that's true?
Well, he was kind of hurt, kind of in and out, and I'm just going to call it. I don't know.
Michelle, add another shot to the list. Michelle's getting fourth.
That's a
shots
shot
keep coming as it
long.
keeps going. I think Porth's record was like 13 called shots one day. It's good stuff.
Yeah. It's hard not to get one right when you call as many shots as Porth used to.
That's true. We'll continue to take your called shots on our text line all show long, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. When we come back, we'll be joined by our man, Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter. We'll get hot and heavy into the Titans just 1 week away now from the regular season. All that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025, The Game. Welcome back in. Hour number 3 of Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic, intern Will here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Robby and Rexrode brought to you by Volunteer State Bank. Real people, real solutions right here. Remember, FDIC, equal housing lender. And it's that time of the week we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our good friend, Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter and host of Talking with TD. TD presented by Freedom Tire Guys, Nashville's premier mobile tire company, online at freedomtireguys.com. TD, what's going on, my man? How we doing?
Hey, good morning. How's everything?
Going pretty well. Appreciate you taking time to join us this morning. TD, a lot to get into it with you today here on the show, but I want to start with Jurrell Casey. Just your thoughts on his retirement, the career he had with the Titans, and just your time covering Jurrell Casey. What stood out about him in a Titans uniform to you?
Yeah, I think when you look at the career he had with the Titans, it was a great case of up and down, right? And he played really hard through it all. You know, he was there for the tough times, and then he was one of the leaders when things got really good, when they went to the AFC Championship game. So that's why I wanted to ask him just, you know, the highlights of that. And the thing that I loved that he said was the camaraderie, and he really enjoyed the family atmosphere that the Titans had, and I could really respect that. As for Casey, just covering him, I always just, you know, I think back on different times where he was very approachable. You could talk to him about anything outside of football even. So there were always great opportunities, you know, to talk to him about different things. And, you know, his vibe was always positive too. Like he talks really fast about football and about some other things because he's very passionate about it. And you saw it in the way that he played. It was literally every snap he was out there, he went hard. And even when the scoreboard didn't reflect, you know, really good effort, he still went at it.
So TD, you got some interesting moves yesterday. Obviously, you know, bad news for the Titans with Darrington Evans, Marcus Johnson on IR here. But also Luke Stocker being cut surprised me a bit. Were you surprised by that? And do you see this as Michael Pruitt maybe just stepping into that? Or is there someone else out there who might make more sense? Obviously the Titans, you know, kind of passed on Pruitt. The 49ers cut him. How do you think that turns out?
Yeah, I think actually that's what the move was done for, in my opinion, to get Pruitt on the roster. And it's funny, they even wear the same number, you know, 85. But I think that's where that one went. I don't think that they have other tight ends in the crosshairs, but I mean, you never know. But I think it's primarily Pruitt to make space for him.
TD, we've talked on the show today, and I know Jared talked about it yesterday on his show as well. The situation coming out from Julio Jones this week. Jeff Schultz came out with a piece, and Arthur Blank talked about his inability to practice, rubbing people with the Falcons the wrong way. Jared talked to some sources yesterday that had some similar things to say about Julio Jones. What's been your reaction to that? And I guess what's your concern level with that, with Julio Jones, if you're a Titans fan, as you move forward here?
Well, the initial comments about practice, I didn't really, you know, dig too much into that, but Jared's comments, like what he was able to dig out, was rather interesting. When they say that on some third downs he didn't want to play, when they say they had a play designed for him, and he came out of the game when that play was called, those are some things that I think should be cause for concern. But really, the way I look at it, and I'm not saying coming here could fix it or eliminate it, but I think being in a different situation, I think that could help not eliminate, like I said, but ease that, right, and not make it as frequent. But what you have to be concerned about is if this team does not win the way that they project to, that could be a problem. So it is something that could be kind of like simmering and ready to boil over, but I think it's really going to depend on how much they win and just how things go. You kind of see him on a management program now, but, you know, he's back in practice, and it seems like he's going to be working through that. So I think it's just a wait-and-see thing.
So when this offense lines up next Sunday, finally it's almost here, TD.
Yep.
Who's going to be the right tackle? Who is wide receiver 3 right now? And do you anticipate in the early going, basically, Sargent is Derek's backup and McNichols is on the roster and on the field on third downs?
Yeah, I think the right tackle, I'm going to go with David Quesenberry. And that's because he started the last couple games there, and I know that, he's someone that they think really highly of, especially from a technique standpoint. And sometimes they use him to teach technique. So, yeah, I think it's going to be Quesenberry. As far as the receivers, that third one, it really depends on Josh Reynolds' health. His health. I'm going to go with Chester Rogers because we're just not sure how healthy Reynolds is with that Achilles. So I'll go Chester Rogers there. What was the other running back situation with Evans on IR? I could see McNichols. He's going to make the roster, and I could see him being the primary backup and third down back. So I think he would be ahead of Sargent on the depth chart, so to speak.
ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, host of Talking with TD, Teron Davenport, on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. TD, what intrigues you the most? What are you most looking forward to seeing out of this Titans team as they round the corner now into Week 1 coming up next week against Arizona?
I want to see the defense. I'm really curious how that defense is going to be in real, live, regular season game action. They look good in the preseason, and they've looked really good in practice. So I want to see how that carries over, whether that pass rush is going to be improved, the third down situation. I actually wrote about that this week on ESPN.com, that the third downs, that 51% is the highest in the last 30 years. So teams were converting third downs into first downs at a higher clip than any other team against the Titans over the last 30 years. So that's a problem. And that's something that really has to be improved upon, and that's why that's such a focus. And you hear the words confidence, commitment, and urgency, communication. All of those are being flushed through when you ask about that third down situation. So I want to see how that defense improves. I want to see how the red zone defense improves as well overall.
You think Caleb Farley is a ways away at this point, TD? And if he is, people shouldn't be that surprised. You can talk about a guy coming off back surgeries and not playing much football, but do you think he's a ways away from challenging for playing time? How far away do you think he is?
Yeah, I think he's a bit. Yeah, I'll say this: he'll be in the rotation, but I think he's not only away from challenging for time. I think he's away from being himself, and he said that before. He's still working through it, and I think you had asked him about the quick twitch aspect, and he said at times it feels like he's in the mud, and that is not a good thing to hear from a guy that is rather twitchy and and has the long speed. So I think it's going to be a little bit, and then once he adjusts to that, then he has to adjust to the speed of the game. So he has a couple things working against him, but that doesn't mean that he won't contribute. I think he will be in the mix, in the rotation.
Well, TD, great stuff as always. And the next time we talk to you next week, we'll be just a couple of days away finally from Week 1 in the NFL for the Titans. So, TD, great stuff, man. Appreciate you taking time to join us this morning.
No problem. Appreciate you guys. Take care.
Absolutely. Teron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter, host of Talking with TD, our guest every Friday here on the show at 8 o'clock. TD presented by Freedom Tire Guys, Nashville's premier mobile tire company, online at freedomtireguys.com. We'll come back. We'll react to what TD had to say there. Get to more of your thoughts on Julio Jones and the Titans as well on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025, The Game. Your favorite game, Silly Underdog Picks, is back. Get your friends and family and sign up to play as a group and play today. Pick the 3 football underdog teams you think will win each week for a chance to win weekly prizes like a pair of tickets to a sporting event or to a concert in Nashville. Go to theGameNashville.com or the ESPN The Game Nashville mobile app and sign up to play now. Silly Underdogs is presented by Volunteer Hose and Gasket. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, presented by Volunteer State Bank, conveniently serving Middle Tennessee with 13 locations. Member FDIC equal housing lender. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic, intern Will, here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, talking Titans, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Sean texting in, have the expectations for Julio's production been going steadily down over the weeks? It seems that way. I like Julio as a player, but I can't ignore the sinking feeling that's been building in my stomach recently about another acquisition that's supposed to be a difference maker. Remember, when we signed him, everyone's first thought was Super Bowl. Well, I can't speak for everyone, Joe, but I mean, my expectations for Julio Jones right now are the exact same as when the Titans traded for him. I expect him to be very productive. I expect him to look close to the Julio Jones that we've seen throughout his career so far. And if he doesn't, I think that would be disappointing. I think that's why you make that trade, is to bring Julio Jones in and to help him take this, or him to come in and help you take the next step and put this offense over the top. So, I don't know that Julio Jones is going to be, Julio Jones from 2016. And we've talked about the role he's going to play with this offense. Not going to get as many targets most likely as he's used to getting, and all that's fine. I still expect Julio Jones to be very productive in this offense as long as he can stay healthy. And if that's not the case, I think that's a major disappointment for this year.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't. Nothing has changed how I feel about the deal to get him. I did not expect to be talking about this amazing string of practices from Julio Jones, or hear that actually everything was wonderful and hunky-dory in Atlanta. I don't think anything's that surprising. I mean, I agree with TD and with Jared that, the leaving the field on the weird and on the play is weird. Obviously, there were some things that just weren't going well there, but I don't feel any differently about what he can bring. It just comes down to, will he be healthy enough? That's, to me, the biggest concern by far over any of this stuff is, last year he missed a lot of games for the first time in a long time, and it's only happened one other time in his career. Is that a sign that he's starting to break down and he's starting to become more injury prone? Or was that, as some people said, a case of he actually wanted to get on the field too fast and prolong the injury, which certainly can happen with hamstrings? Health is the concern. And I agree also with TD that, look, if this season in general doesn't go well and they aren't winning enough, then who knows what could happen there. But like having a sinking feeling based on what's happened or these stories, I would. It's like a preseason thing, a phenomenon of the preseason, almost like, Mason Kinsey, how is he not on the team? And, Mekhi Sargent's going to run for 800 yards this year. I mean, it's the freaking preseason, so the season can't get here fast enough.
And we're almost there, just about a week away now from the NFL regular season, less than a week from the season itself kicking out, more than a week away, just barely, for the Titans kicking off. For those that missed it, Jeff Schultz earlier this week reporting in quotes from Arthur Blank in there as well about how Julio Jones and his limited practice availability rubbed coaches and executives in Atlanta the wrong way. Jared Stillman yesterday on his show with more reporting on that front, talking to sources that say that Julio Jones that showed up in 2011 and the Julio Jones towards the end of his career with Atlanta, not the same guy, didn't want to practice in some cases, maybe took himself out of the game, took himself off the field for a play, and we're reacting to that now on the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, as well as our streaming platforms. And on YouTube, Big League Designs says, was the Julio thing a case of I don't want to play or practice, or was it a case of I don't want to play or practice for this organization with the Falcons? And that, to me, is the big question with this story.
Well, exactly. To me, if you followed along at the time of the contract stuff, it got nasty. And so I have to think it's that. And again, I have to think that, Julio Jones hears this stuff and here's the questions and here's the discontent coming out of Atlanta. And again, if you're the Titans, you hope he hears that and says, okay, I'll show you guys something then. How about starting next Sunday, I'll show you something. And if he shows you stuff on Sundays, this stuff is going to be quickly forgotten about, maybe even laughed at.
Let's go back to the text line. Got a texture that says, you would hope the coaching staff here was aware of his lack of practice before they traded for him and are okay with it. Also, I'm okay with him not practicing if he's going to unleash the beast every week on the field.
The only thing I would argue there is, again, going back to Mike Vrabel, and I think most head coaches, I think if someone is healthy and just doesn't want to practice, I think long term that's not going to fly. It's like, why not?
Right.
I mean, you're paid millions to play football, including a few hours a week of preparing to play football, and that's it. So now if there's any kind of minor injury, Julio Jones is one of those guys, like Derrick Henry, or any veteran is going to perform if he's out there on a Sunday. He's probably they're going to err on the side of caution. But as far as just volunteer, like, I'm just not going to practice, I don't think that'll fly. But I just don't see that happening. Maybe I'm wrong. I saw him out there last week going through those ladder drills and all that stuff. I mean, I think he'll practice if he's 100% healthy.
Dennis texting in on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. I thought everyone expected Julio wasn't going to practice a lot. He's a 32-year-old future Hall of Famer. He knows what he needs to do to be ready on Sundays. And again, I said this earlier, like, if you told me right now that Julio Jones was going to operate at basically the same way he did the last couple of seasons in Atlanta, not from a being mad at the front office standpoint, but from he's on the injury report, he's not practicing a whole lot, but for the most part, he finds a way to go out there on Sunday and play, and not only play, but play at a high level. If you told me that was going to happen this year with the Titans, and he's playing in 15 games or 16 games or close to all season long, I mean, I'm signing up for that right now. Like, I don't really care if Julio Jones practices or not, as long as he continues to be productive on the field. Now, if he's not productive, and if the lack of practice is more than an injury thing, and it's I just don't really feel like practicing. Number one, I agree. That's not going to fly with the Titans, and Mike Vrabel is not going to allow that to happen. But number two, that's when it starts to become a longer-term concern. My guess is, with the fresh scenery, with teammates that, I think he feels really good about, obviously with Derrick Henry and the Alabama connection, and as you've said, his relationship with A.J. Brown, I think as long as the Titans are winning and winning at the clip that they're expected to win at, I think everything with Julio Jones is going to be fine.
Yeah. Now, if on Sundays, he's not practicing and you see some obvious situations where, like, he and Tannehill aren't on the same page, he runs a route wrong or whatever, there's a pick because he wasn't in the spot, that's when it starts to get like, okay, well, see, this is why practice matters. But, to the texter's point, like if you said, what's your over-under on percentage of practices Julio Jones will participate in / like needs to participate in, it wouldn't be that high for me. It wouldn't be a high percentage. I'm just saying, if it's just straight up, I don't practice, I'm a star, I don't need practice, I think over a long haul, Mike Vrabel would not like that. And I don't know any coach that would, but just saying specifically Mike Vrabel, I don't think he would like that. But yeah, look, Vrabel came out this camp and looked and said, Derrick Henry, go in the sand pit, stay in shape, relax, and we'll see you on September 12th. And that's just the smart move. It's not like Julio Jones has got to be out there every day in order for him to perform on Sundays, or else, boy, his career numbers would look a lot different right now.
Yes, they would. When we come back, we'll switch gears, get back into the Tennessee Volunteers, a 38-6 win last night for the Vols in Josh Heupel's first game as head coach. What were some of our takeaways? There was some good. There was some bad. There was even some ugly in that game last night as well for Tennessee. We'll get into that a little bit more coming up next. Right now, though, I got to tell you about the Nashville Predators. Hockey almost back, right around the corner here. And the best way to guarantee a spot in Smashville for all the best games is by becoming a season ticket citizen. But single game tickets are a flexible option as well. And Nashville Predators regular season and preseason games in October, November, and December are now on sale to the general public. Future months will go on sale in the coming weeks. You can find those on sale exclusively at Ticketmaster.com. Don't miss out on the 16 exciting home games scheduled during the first 3 months of the season. For more information on Predators tickets, you can visit NashvillePredators.com/tickets. Once again, that's NashvillePredators.com/tickets. That was our friend Big Orange Mac yesterday here on the show, looking ahead to Tennessee's debut against Bowling Green. And a win for Josh Heupel in Game 1 as Tennessee's head coach. 38-6, the final score last night for Tennessee against Bowling Green. Joe, there was some good in this game. There was a lot of nyeh in this game, and there was some bad as well. Let's start with some of the good from last night. Tennessee ran the ball really well, 326 yards on the ground. Tyon Evans, 116 yards. Jabari Small, 116 yards as well. They ran the ball very well. 4 touchdowns on the ground, 2 by Joe Milton, and we'll get a little bit more into Joe Milton coming up here in just a few minutes. But I thought they ran the ball well, but honestly, Joe, I'm not sure how much we learned about the Tennessee running game last night, because if you couldn't run the ball against that Bowling Green team, you're probably not going to run the ball against very many people this year on that schedule.
Yeah, look, Bowling Green is trash, okay?
They're awful.
Bowling Green is dog water. And you better dominate that team. 326-36 on the ground. Tennessee did dominate up front, and there's a couple more weeks maybe this season where you'll be able to do that and just do whatever you want to do. But it's about to get a lot more difficult against Pittsburgh, and it's certainly going to be more difficult in the SEC. So I will say that I like the running backs. I mean, again, if you're dominating up front, your running backs are going to look better, right? Are they going to be able to run like that against good teams? I don't know, but I will say that just some of the cuts and the speed, the conviction and power they ran with, I liked them. The only thing I do think, like, Jabari Small and Tyon Evans are very similar. You know, like, you'd like to have a little bit more of a contrast there, but I think they're both good backs, and that's actually going to be interesting.
Yeah. You
know, who emerges as RB1 there? I mean, it's a nice tandem, but does one of them emerge? But I like them. I think in the open field, you saw some really good things. And defensively, I liked what some individuals were doing out there.
Yeah.
I mean, Tyler Barron is a guy who's going to give them pass rush this year. I think we saw that. They need to get Byron Young out there for this week or for next week, the next game, if possible. And Heupel sounded last night like it's kind of red tape, get through the eligibility stuff, and they hope he's back. I thought there were some guys in the secondary who played well. You know, they're like you said earlier, they gave up some of that stuff on the outside, a little bit of wheel route stuff. They got victimized a little bit, but like, I thought some of those guys, Jalen McCullough is a guy I thought really flashed a few times. So there were some things to like. It's just when you are so much better than a team up front, everything else gets so much easier. Right. And that's why the passing game should have been so much better.
And it was not. Joe Milton, 11 of 23 last night, 140 yards and a touchdown. And again, I realize it. It's a 38-6 win for Tennessee. And they're in a spot right now with their program where you'll take every single win you can get. So that's fine. A 32-point margin of victory is good. Bowling Green is awful. I mean, they are maybe one of the worst college football teams I've ever seen. They were awful last night. And look, Joe Milton, he had some drops that went against him. Jalen Hyatt dropped a couple of balls that he absolutely should have caught. But all in all, I did not think it was an impressive night for Joe Milton throwing the ball. He had time to throw on most occasions. Quite frankly, I thought there were times where he held on to the ball a little bit too long, maybe looking for the perfect read out there. Obviously, Cedric Tillman, he had a deep ball to Cedric Tillman twice that he overthrew. He connected with one towards the end of the game, and that was more of just a throw up a jump ball and see if Cedric Tillman can go get it, and it was a great play by Tillman to go up and get the ball. But all in all, I mean, you're talking about 140 yards passing for Milton last night. Hendon Hooker, 1 of 1 for 5 yards. So 145 yards total passing the ball last night in a game against a team where you should have been able to do way more damage to that through the air. And honestly, I thought it was very underwhelming last night for Tennessee's offense throwing the football.
Yeah, it was concerning. It doesn't mean Joe Milton can't work out. Doesn't mean he can't improve from that game. But he was 7 for 9 for 68 yards in the first 2 drives, and I thought he was really good. I think the best thing I saw in those drives, some of it was just throw the screen, quick stuff. They had some QB run stuff I thought was good, but there were a couple times where he extended plays and he got through progressions and made good throws. So 7 for 9 for 68 yards. On the next, I think, 7 drives, he completed 3 passes for 32 yards, until that 40-yarder late. I mean, and again, there's just no reason for it. They got to him a few times, but I think more on those plays, you could call it a coverage sack, or you could call it a not seeing the open receiver sack. There were some times he could have broken the pocket, but he was a little bit late doing it. I thought his eyes a few too many times, came down from downfield to the pass rush. It's just when you play, if you have that kind of performance against Pittsburgh, or I'd say anyone they play in the SEC, it won't go well. Doesn't mean that you will have that performance, but there's a ton to work on for this coaching staff and Joe Milton. And, I think those other two quarterbacks should stay ready. If you play like that for a half against Pittsburgh, you're not going to have much success at all, and you might need to make a switch. I know I'm talking about switching QBs after one game, but Joe Milton's got to get a lot better than that.
He does. And look, there's a lot to like about Joe Milton. I mean, physically 6'5", 250. I mean, he's huge out there, and I thought he ran the ball at times pretty well last night. Obviously found the end zone twice. And look, he's got an absolute cannon. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. We talked about it earlier. On the two overthrows he had to Tillman, it looked like he was barely flicking his wrist, and the ball was going 60 yards in the air. So, I mean, he's got a huge arm, and that's a weapon that you can have at your disposal that can be a huge difference maker for you. But it just kind of goes to show you last night, having a huge arm isn't everything. You've got to have some touch, and more than just the overthrows, because, a lot of people are talking about the overthrows today and the inaccuracy on that part of it, and that's something that, while concerning, you can continue to work on if you're Joe Milton. I thought I was more concerned by, as the game went on, the reads and the progressions and just kind of seeing the field as the quarterback. It wasn't really there. And Jordan Rodgers talked about it a little bit on the broadcast as well. I mean, he had some receivers that he just missed that were wide open. You brought up the Jalen Hyatt example. There was a play where he had all the time in the world, and Princeton Fant ran basically a corner route to the end zone, and he was wide open. I mean, there's nobody around him. And Milton just didn't see him and pulled the ball down and ran. Like, you can't miss those plays as a starting quarterback in the SEC. So, in a way, it's a good thing. There's a lot to point to if you're Josh Heupel in the film today and saying, I mean, just look at these routes here. They're developing. You've got to find a way to see those and get rid of the ball. But I was not impressed as the game went on last night of the reads by Joe Milton, which is funny because, to your point, I thought the first couple of drives, he was excellent in that regard.
Yeah, extending plays, keeping his eyes downfield. And, again, look, because of his arm, he can afford to be later than a lot of quarterbacks can be on some things. I mean, as long as your receivers can catch the ball without their fingers breaking. But, I mean, you can make up for a half-second slower read, or whatever with that arm. But like you said, you do also have to have touch on passes and things like that. You got to be able to anticipate better. I'm with you. I'm less concerned about missing those deep balls than probably any of it. That happens plenty, and that can be worked out. And honestly, if Hyatt or Peyton or some of those guys are running the same route, they probably go catch that ball. I mean, Tillman is, I'd say, probably the slowest of all the primary receivers on this team. But yeah, it's just the lack of vision that you saw as the game wore on that was concerning. So Milton right now, he's a guy, if he's a quarterback all year, he's going to do some spectacular things that we'll talk about, and they'll be replayed a million times. I totally get why people are enamored with him. There is a special quarterback in there, but if you give a coach a choice of, okay, someone who can throw the ball 120 yards or someone who is consistently accurate every time on the short and intermediate stuff and gets the ball out fast, they'll take option 2. But they also, these coaches, it's on them to, one, correct the things that need to be corrected, but also make sure that they're tailoring things around him. The problem is when you get into 3rd and 10, like you're going to against good teams, pretty simple. Like, you've got to make reads. You got to read the defense pre-snap. You got to go know the protection. You got to make reads. You got to make a quick, accurate throw into a tight window. And the last night version of Joe Milton is going to struggle with that.
Nashville SC fans, join ESPN 94.9 this Monday, September the 6th from 7 to 8 p.m. for NSC Backstage featuring Nashville SC players and coaches. You can watch the show online via 102.5 The Game's Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and at thegamenashville.com. NSC Backstage brought to you by Camarena Tequila, the official tequila of Nashville SC. We'll continue the discussion on the Vols when we come back. What was your reaction to Tennessee's season opening win last night? How concerned are you about Joe Milton and the passing game? We'll get into all that coming up next. 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025 on our phone and text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Brought to you by Volunteer State Bank. Now with 2 locations in Murfreesboro. Visit our brand new Murfreesboro location at 2019 Memorial Boulevard. Volunteer State Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Talking Vols, taking your thoughts on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, reacting to a 38-6 win last night for the Vols. Wasn't always pretty on the offensive side of the ball, especially in the passing game. Shane from Ashland City texting in, I feel like last night was a perfect example of how the Vols season is going to go. That game should have been between 50 and 60 points for the Vols. Not a fan of either, but the officials in the Ohio State-Minnesota game were horrible as well as the kid who got knocked out who was defenseless. You claim you only want to protect the kids, but not only do you let this happen, but you also just watch it on replay. Just to say it was a fumble recovered by Ohio State was pathetic. And also there was a targeting replay last night in the Tennessee game as well, where basically the Bowling Green player got shoved into the Tennessee running back. And I thought for a second they were going to keep that and uphold that, and I'm glad that was a very quick targeting review because Joe Rexrode, you know how at times I feel about this targeting play. Sometimes it gets on my nerves.
No, honestly, I thought that one, I immediately said that one is coming off, and it should have been and good for them. It did. Yeah, I have not yet seen the Ohio State play people are talking about. It was my entire Twitter feed for about 10 minutes was nothing but complaints about it, so it must have been pretty bad. But, yeah, they did get that one right. We are on the same page on that one,
they
sir.
did. That is correct. Let's go back to the text line. Wes texting in. I felt at times there was no rhythm to the offense for Tennessee. It's concerning that happened against Bowling Green. I want to believe the offense was bland to not show much to Pittsburgh and the other teams. I don't know that there was much, holding things back last night if you're Josh Heupel. I mean, it was a simple formula, really. They were running the ball and having a pretty good amount of success doing it, and they wanted to throw the ball down the field and kept trying to throw the ball down the field, and it just didn't really work last night. So I didn't really see, Joe, last night a case of not putting a lot on film. I mean, I'm sure they didn't really empty their playbook last night against Bowling Green, but I thought it was more if you're the offense last night about trying to find a level of execution that they never really found throughout the course of the game through the passing game.
Yeah, I mean, they'll have a different, game plan against Pittsburgh, and I'm sure have some things they didn't show, but there's some stuff about this offense that I think you're going to see some of the same stuff every week. There's some bread, some of those screens, that's bread and butter. Some of the QB run stuff I think will be bread and butter, and then, you try to set up the little hitch and go that they got a PI on. I mean, they're going to run some of those same things. Again, regardless of whatever a play call is, there were play calls last night that resulted in a quarterback with time to throw and with receivers who were open for him to throw to.
Yep.
And he didn't throw it to him. That has nothing to do with playbook. That has nothing to do with being vanilla because you're only playing Bowling Green. You got to play pitch and catch, and you got to see guys who are open and anticipate guys being open based on what you know of the routes and what you know of the coverage. And it just looked too often after the first couple of drives like it was trying to see if someone was going to be open. And if that's how you're doing it, you're going to struggle against good defenses. You got to know what they're coming with, and you got to know what your answer is and be ready to unleash it.
Also, 0 involvement last night for Velus Jones Jr. on offense. He had 2 kick returns in the game. We talked about it heading into the game yesterday. He's been dealing with an injury, and Josh Heupel talked about him being ready to play at a great level. Not much action for Velus Jones Jr. last night.
Yeah, hamstring is my understanding, and we know how that goes. So I think, hopefully for him, he can get past that and get out there because I think he could be a factor. I tell you what, though, I even as poorly as the passing game performed, I do think there's still a lot of guys, who can make plays. I mean, Jalen Hyatt had a couple drops, got to bounce back from that. He's going to be very good. He's going to be the leading receiver on this team.
Yeah.
And, I think Peyton can make plays. We didn't see Callaway yet. So it's going to be still a battle even for Velus Jones when he does get healthy, I think.
No, I think you're
snaps.
right. Yeah, I think you're right on that front. I would, if he was healthy last night, at some point you'd like to see it, not only with him, but with Hyatt as well. And it's Bowling Green, so they didn't really have to do this last night. But, it's one thing to throw the ball down the field to those two, and that's going to be an important part of the offense. Like, you've got to connect on those. But also, like, those are two guys where you just get the ball in their hands quickly if you need to and see what they can do with it, whether it's Hyatt or Velus Jones. So, we talked about that last year with Jones specifically, with Jim Chaney and that archaic offense they were running. They just never got the ball in the hands of their playmakers. Like, you've got to find a way to do that if you're Josh Heupel this year. And when you do that, your playmakers got to catch the ball, because Jalen Hyatt did not do that twice last night.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the first one was a little bit behind him.
It was.
But that's still a 25-yard chunk play that it hits both hands. The second drop was one of Milton's best throws, I thought. It was on time. He saw it right away. He put it exactly where you need to put it. Got to catch that one.
Going to have David Ubben from The Athletic coming up here in just a few minutes to begin the 9 o'clock hour. Joe, I'm interested now if you're Tennessee, and obviously a big step up in competition coming up with Pittsburgh next week. And look, I'm not under any illusions that Pittsburgh is some great team out there, but they're a whole lot better than Bowling Green. I can guarantee you that. How short do you think the leash is with Joe Milton based on what we've just seen? Hendon Hooker came in as the number 2 quarterback last night. Harrison Bailey obviously still in the mix as well. If there's not improvement from Joe Milton's side of things early on in the Pittsburgh game, how quickly do you think it could be before we see a quarterback swap?
Well, look, this was a competition, right? I mean, apparently Joe Milton didn't lock this down until the second scrimmage. Hendon Hooker was the number 1 guy by all accounts in the spring. I think if you had a stretch like Tennessee had last night after the first 2 for about like 5-6, again they had the possession where they just ran the ball and scored. But I mean, like the passing game stretch like that, I mean, I think you would have to at some point. And again, it also depends on game situation.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh has a guy, Kenny Pickens, at quarterback who some believe can be an NFL prospect too. I mean, you're going to be losing a game if you have this kind of passing offense. So I don't think it's off limits at all to think about a swap if Joe Milton doesn't play better in the next game. It doesn't mean that he couldn't come back and get the job. People don't want to play, musical chairs with quarterbacks, but you're just starting out this thing. You have this new offense, and when you have a chance to win games, and Pittsburgh is one of those swing games on the schedule, you got to do whatever you can to win the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting, too. One of the things that was obviously a big change of pace last night, both figuratively and literally, to watch was how quickly the Tennessee offense ran. They had 88 plays last night. I think Bowling Green ended up with 61. So a lot of plays run in the game last night for Tennessee with 88. Obviously it's a completely different style than what they've been running the last couple of years. That's going to take some time for some guys on the roster to adapt to. So, there are a lot of Tennessee fans today freaking out about the offense. I'm very interested to see what it looks like in week 2. Can there be a lot of improvement, significant improvement on that front? I thought operationally they actually did a better job than I thought they would last night. There wasn't a bunch of penalties, and they lined up correctly for the most part. The RPO is going to be a big part of this offense. I thought they executed that well for the most part last night as well. So there are some positives, lots of positives to take away. It boils down to you've got to find a way to execute in the passing game, and also when you're stepping up and going up against a bigger challenge against Pittsburgh, can you continue to run the ball with success? Now, you're not going to run for 300 yards most likely against Pittsburgh, but can it still be something with Evans and Small that's a big weapon for you in the running game? If you can, ultimately that's going to do nothing but help your quarterback in the passing game.
Yeah, I thought it was really overall like a clean game. It was a good, it's the first game of a coaching era, right? Everybody's like, okay, what about the penalties? And it's usually like the last guy, so many penalties, But the operation was good. Nobody was lining up wrong. Didn't have any illegal formation, stuff like that. You had one, I think their third drive may have been a touchdown too, but Darnell Wright had the holding penalty. But yeah, for the most part, it was good. I mean, I think everything was executed well, other than the actual passing and catching of the football. So, unfortunately, that's a huge part of
It is.
these things working. But Josh Heupel after the game, he was to me a little bit more critical, a little bit more. I mean, he said multiple times, talked about decision making, talked about accuracy, talked about missing open guys. One thing that does tell me is that this is not what Heupel has seen in practice from Joe Milton. And frankly, if Joe Milton has been practicing like this, Joe Milton would not be the quarterback.
Exactly.
He wouldn't have won the job. Now, I know, and I'm already seeing it in the comments on my column off the game. Michigan fans saying, "Well, this is what he is at me. He was a practice guy, and then he not, and hey, that does happen sometimes. Maybe that's the case." This is a huge, huge game for not just Tennessee, but for Joe Milton, and I think his future. I'm not saying it all hinges on this Pittsburgh game, but this is a game where I think he establishes himself and says, okay, he had some rough patches the first game, but he's fine. Or, yeah, that job could be up for grabs.
When we come back, we'll be joined by David Ubben from The Athletic. He covers college football with a pretty heavy area of expertise on the Tennessee Volunteers as well. We'll get to that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game. Welcome back in. Final hour of Robby and Rexrode, sponsored by Volunteer State Bank. Real people, real solutions right here. Member FDIC and equal housing lender. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezovic, intern Will here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee, talking Vols reacting to a 38-6 win last night in Josh Heupel's first game. And to help us talk more about that, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our good friend David Ubben from The Athletic, who covers college football. David, what's going on, man? How we doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. First off, my condolences of having to sit next to Rexrode in the press box last night. I know that could be something.
I mean, it's a tough job. Somebody has to do it. I guess we work for the same outlet, so I guess they put us together. I tried to tell them not to. I said as far away from possible as possible, but they didn't listen. So, next time probably.
That's right.
Hey, yeah, and I apologize for milking your phone streaming since I couldn't even figure out how to stream the Ohio State game. But and also for eating more ice cream than I should have been allotted. So
that sounds about right.
Yep, some things never change on that front. That's for sure. So, David, we've been talking all show long about the game last night, but a lot about Joe Milton as well. Obviously, some good things for Joe Milton last night. A couple of touchdowns on the ground. The first two drives especially looked really good, no matter what Joe Milton was doing, but finishes 11 of 23, 140 yards through the air, some missed passes, some missed reads and progressions as well. Overall, what did you think of Joe Milton and his performance last night? And I guess if you're a Tennessee fan today, what's your concern level after watching the passing game last night against what was a truly horrendous Bowling Green team?
Yeah, I mean, you saw the tools, obviously. I think the indecision, the inaccuracy, has to give you a little bit of pause, but it's also early, and I'm sure there's a level of, nerve with that. And, year one, I think Josh Heupel said it multiple times last night. I mean, year one, week one, there's always going to be some hitches, going off. And so we'll see. I think it's tough to really judge him off one game. I think, I don't know if the parade for him is quite scheduled just yet, but, you obviously see the potential. You obviously see the tools. It's just a matter of turning those tools into production, and he's got a lot of time to try and do that.
So I was just mentioning this, David. I want to see if you agree. I thought I was a little bit surprised that Heupel, I think, pretty critical. I mean, he brought up a lot of the things that we saw in the press box last night. I guess it struck me a little bit because I kind of expected almost a little bit of it's early and we did some good things, we did some bad things. We'll look at the film, we'll get back to you, like coaches often do. But he was, I feel like he was not upset, but maybe a little bit concerned. I can't imagine that Joe Milton has played this way, in practice to win this job. So first of all, do you agree with me on that? And then the follow-up there is, do you think that like a Hendon Hooker could be in somewhat quickly here if this continues against good teams, which, as we know, you won't be dominating them up front and you probably won't be producing much on offense?
I really don't think so. I think, it was interesting, his approach. It was pretty honest. I think we all kind of saw the same things that Josh Heupel was saying. Some of the decision-making, I think, when you complete a pass, people call it poise when you're calling the pocket. And when you sit there and kind of get chased out of the pocket when guys are running free and all those things, we call it something else. But, he was asked after the game if he thought about switching, and he was very quick to put that away. He almost seemed kind of perturbed at the question, I suppose. So I really don't think so. I think there's no doubt in the staff's mind. I think it's going to take a lot for them to make a move. I mean, I think it boils down to, are you really hurting the team in terms of turnovers or really making a lot of losing plays? And for whatever it's worth, the one fumble he had was kind of a blindside hit. It was kind of like, okay. But you didn't see a lot of losing plays from Joe Milton last night. You just saw a lot of plays that he could have made that he didn't make. And I think there's a big difference in those two things.
David, is there anything that you can take away from the defensive side of the ball last night if you're Tennessee to build on moving forward? Or given the quality of the opponent, did you just really not learn all that much against Bowling Green?
Yeah, I mean, it's encouraging that you didn't have any busts. I mean, you didn't give up a touchdown, so it's hard to, be too broken up about that. But I think when you dominate the line of scrimmage like Tennessee did against a team that's just not very good, like Bowling Green, it's hard to really know because if you're winning that line of scrimmage, everything gets easier. I mean, Tennessee didn't have to blitz very much last night. I mean, obviously, I haven't gone back and watched, but I didn't see a ton of that. They did a little bit, but it didn't seem like they were super, super aggressive because they didn't have to be. They could rush 4 and get some pressure. And when you can do that, that makes everything easy. And I'm not sure how many teams are going to be able to do that on this year. So, like I said, I think you can take solace in that the communication seemed pretty good. Guys seemed comfortable. There weren't a lot of busts. But beyond that, I mean, this was, kind of like a scrimmage for Tennessee. And just Bowling Green is in dire shape at the moment.
Yeah, they're bad. I mean, they're really, really bad. I did think that, like, on that point, pass rush, 4-man pass rush. I liked some things I saw from Tyler Barron. I have liked some things, and I thought that he might be, a guy who could really do something this year. I was looking forward to seeing Byron Young out there last night. We did not see him. I guess this is another press conference, decoding question, but like, did you get the sense that this is just a red tape thing, and that there's a pretty good chance he might be actually on the field against Pittsburgh? I would think they could use him.
Well, I kind of talked to a few folks last night. It seems like they're in the appeal process right now. I mean, it's one of these things where you can't it's the NCAA. Like, how they interpret things is so unpredictable, and the timing of things is frustrating. They were hoping they could get this done, and they couldn't in time. So, it sort of dates back to a prep school that he had attended in 2017, and that sort of starts his clock for playing. And nobody could really fully explain exactly what was going on, but it's an eligibility issue. I mean, the core of it is, it's just sort of a clerical issue. It's not anything obviously connected to the investigation. He didn't do anything wrong. It's nothing about benefits or anything like that. It's just sort of, it's not like bad grades or anything. It's just sort of, he had a unique road to where he was at, where, basically went to a prep school after high school, and then ended up in a JUCO, and that's sort of gotten a little messy, and they're trying to sort this stuff out.
David Oven from The Athletic on the line with us, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. So, David, kind of switching gears a little bit, outside of the obvious of it being a top 5 matchup, what intrigues you the most about Georgia versus Clemson coming up this weekend?
I mean, I really want to see Georgia. What can their defense do? I think that it's really possible that Georgia's defense could flex a little bit and hold Clemson under 20 points. If they can do that, that tells me a lot about who Georgia's going to be. Georgia, they should be better offensively this year. I think they have certainly a lot of potential. JT Daniels came on strong last year, but now that he's healthy, he's had a full offseason. You're in year 2 with Todd Monken. I'm really interested to see what we have with Georgia, because for so long, it's like, well, this is probably the best team that Kirby has had at Georgia in terms of potential. They've got the best defensive line in the country. They're banged up, and they had Tyke Smith and a couple other guys. Their defense and tight ends, they're a little George Pickens out. They'll have some issues there, but this is a team that has a ton of potential, and I want to see if they can make do on that. I think they get a sense of how good this Georgia team could be in a really tough test in week 1.
I'm feeling Florida State over Notre Dame. Have I lost it?
Yes. Line of scrimmage play. That decides 85-90% of games almost, and Florida State is still dreadful on both lines. So I don't see it.
All right, I'm going to bring this up if I'm right. I was almost right about my guy. I was almost right about my guy PJ Fleck last night. I was hanging that over your head for a little while, and then the boat got on road.
Yeah, it was a better game than I thought it was going to be. I got to tell you, I thought we were going to see an Ohio State flex for similar reasons. That Minnesota skill position talent has allowed them to kind of climb the ladder in the Big Ten, but they're not quite on the lines where they need to be. But they ran the ball really well last night.
David, last thing for you here. Outside of Georgia and Clemson, what game this weekend intrigues you the most as we look ahead to the first full weekend of college football?
I think obviously besides Georgia Clemson, I really want to see LSU UCLA. What do they have to offer? What can we expect from this UCLA or from this LSU team? Was last year a blip or was last year the beginning of the end? I think we'll get a sense of what that looks like. That one jumps out to me. Texas Louisiana is going to be really interesting. Billy Napier's got as much hype as anybody, and they've got a really good shot to knock off Texas. We'll see there. I think those two jump out to me as two that I'll be watching pretty closely.
Do you buy into this idea out there that Miami can keep it close against Alabama?
No, bloodbath. That'll be bad. Alabama just destroys these kind of offenses. Their linebackers are unbelievable. They're going to be able to give Derek King a really long night. I don't think Derek King is good enough as a passer to make them pay. And then, of course, just too much Bama. Those linebackers are so good, and the offense should have a nice day. They're going to control the line of scrimmage, and that's going to get ugly. And not to mention Nick Saban with 8 months to prep.
Yeah.
He was watching Miami tape 30 minutes after they beat Ohio State for the title. So
that's right.
Best of luck to the Canes, but I don't envy.
For the record, I'm fully on board with this one. I totally agree with you.
There we go.
Way to go out on a limb for me,
Very nicely done. David Ubben from The Athletic has been our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. David, great stuff, man. Appreciate you taking time to join us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. David Ubben from The Athletic. We'll come back. We'll react a little bit to what David had to say there. Take your thoughts as well on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. And speaking of college football, it's back, and FanDuel Sportsbook is making Week 1 even more exciting because right now all customers get a risk-free bet on any Week 1 game. That's right, any Week 1 bet you want, and you can get a refund and site credit if you don't win. We just talked about Alabama and Miami. I am heavy on the Tide in this game, but you take it any way you want to take it. Offers like this are just one of the many reasons I love betting college football on FanDuel. It's the #1 rated sportsbook app in America. It's easy to use, safe and secure, and you get your money quickly in as little as 24 hours. So just open the FanDuel Sportsbook app to get started. If you're new to FanDuel Sportsbook, sign up with promo code ROB to also get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. Once again, that promo code is ROB. You must be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. Refund issued is non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 7 days. A max refund of $10 unless otherwise indicated. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Got a gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Redline, 1-800-889-9789. Don't miss the 2021 Middle Tennessee Highland Games and Celtic Festival Saturday, September the 11th at Percy Warner Park. A fun-filled day full of Celtic games, children's activities, Celtic music, food, Scottish and Irish dancers, local and regional vendors, and much more. Tickets are on sale now, and you can visit mid10games.com for more details. Once again, that's mid10games.com. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, brought to you by Volunteer State Bank, conveniently serving Middle Tennessee with 13 locations. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Michelle Knezvik, intern Will here with you on this Friday morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Thanks to David Ubben for joining us in the last segment. And Joe Rexrode, what did you think of Ubben's take there that he doesn't believe that Joe Milton's starting job is going to be in danger anytime soon, even if he continues to play the way we saw in Game 1 coming up against Pittsburgh?
I rarely disagree with Ubben, so now I'm like, wait a minute, am I having a Stillman-ish fanicky reaction to Joe Milton last night? He may be right, though. In all seriousness, he may be right that, like, I don't think they want to make a change. No. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, if you're in a game and it's a swing game on your schedule like the next one is, and you go a half of football and it's the same stuff and you're not producing and you're losing, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that you would go to, I would assume it would be Hendon Hooker. I mean, I took Hendon Hooker coming out last night to hand off as Hendon Hooker is QB2. And I think that makes sense based on the spring, too. Hooker versus Bailey. Hooker was ahead of Bailey in the spring. So regardless, I don't think it's a crazy idea to do that, and then you'll see next game. It doesn't mean now Joe Milton is cast aside for the rest of the season. You've got to try to win a football game. So I don't think they want to. I think it would take a prolonged, situation of not producing. But within that game, if you're losing and the offense is going nowhere and you need a spark, that's where you get a spark more than anything, is at quarterback or lack of spark.
Kenneth texting in on the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. What I saw was a lot of passes that will be intercepted against decent competition last night. I don't even know that I agree with that. I just think there are a lot of missed passes. There was one out route that he threw that as soon as he let go of the ball, I was like, oh, boy. And
yeah,
he didn't quite get picked off, but it was probably not a great decision on that front. But I didn't come away thinking there was a lot of balls he threw last night that are going to get picked. There's just too many balls that he threw that just missed flat out.
Right. Yeah, I agree. He wasn't flirting with disaster a lot. But see, this is where I would disagree a little bit with David on this too. I hear him on, like, look, there's a difference between losing plays, like Garantano against Kentucky last year, and just missing some shots. But again, like when you moving forward here against Pittsburgh, against SEC teams, you're going to have to. You're going to have to make quick decisions and fit the ball in. You're just not going to have guys running free. You're not going to be able to stand there and not even have to have any kind of footwork at all and just say, okay, you go over here. It's just not going to happen. Now, the counter to that could be, well, this was a weird game and that was a situation, but in a different situation, knowing the pass rush is coming, knowing the ball has to get out fast with a specific game plan to attack specific things the opponent does, he could look totally different. And I would agree with that. I just thought last night there were some situations where it was right there for him and he didn't see it.
Jacob in Murfreesboro texting in, Milton's touchdown pass in the fourth quarter would have been picked off against SEC defensive backs. Maybe. It was a good play by Tillman to go up and get the ball. Maybe.
Yeah. The Vols are on scholarship too. The Vols have good receivers. Those guys, their receiving core is an SEC receiving core. It's not like an Alabama receiving core per se, but it's those guys make plays against SEC defensive backs.
Yeah, and look, there's been a lot of, I guess, negativity is probably the right word today about Joe Milton on the show and in the text line as well, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. I do, even after last night, I still think there are reasons to be excited about him. An arm like that doesn't just come around very often. He's got a massive arm, and he can throw the ball anywhere you need to throw him on the field. So that's a weapon you have at your disposal if you're this offense that not many other offenses around the league are going to have and around the country are going to have, just based on pure arm talent that he brings to the table. So I think you feel good about that if you're a Tennessee fan. Now, he's got to hone it in, and there's going to have to be some touch developing. We talked so much about the deep ball today. I think there's some touch that's going to have to be developed on the short to intermediate routes too. Like, he rolled out to the left one time last night, and it may have been Tillman again. I can't remember who it was on the sideline. But Milton threw it about 100 miles an hour, 8 yards away, and it ended up being incomplete out of bounds. There's a time and a place to burn it in there. He's got to, I guess, get a better grasp on when that time and place is, because your receivers are going to get your hands taken off from that close.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, they talked about that last year at Michigan. They were kind of seriously joking about like breaking receivers' fingers and stuff. And so I had a quote. So I did a piece on Milton for this week going into the game, and I talked to Donovan Dooley, his individual QB coach, and every college quarterback has an individual coach as well. And I actually used one of his quotes in my column today about that, which is, to paraphrase, like, if you only have a fastball, that's good if you're a closer. But if you're a starting pitcher, I bet you that people are going to tee off on you if that's all you have. So they've worked a lot on, like, you got to be able to have touch on certain throws. You got to change speeds. And again, a lot of it is also beyond like whether you're throwing it a million miles an hour or not. It's also anticipating throws. And that's a lot of the things that they talk about that he's gotten better at. Like, it wasn't on display last night. But I do think that if he understands it, and if this is what he's showing in practice, then you got to have reasonable amount of hope that he can locate it on game day. He knows, and they know, that it's going to be totally different, and the standing in the pocket stuff is over now. So just knowing that, maybe that helps him. And the fact that last night he knew, if they watched film of these guys, they knew that they could do whatever they wanted to against them. So maybe he was trying to be too perfect, make too many big plays, and in a game against an actual credible opponent, he's more of the mindset of, boom, let's get it out. What's my read here? What's my hot read here? And he looks different. That's very possible.
Well, it is, and it's interesting to think about, maybe a quarterback in some cases having too much time. I think maybe there were some opportunities last night where maybe there was too much time to sit there and think about it.
Yeah, I mean, quarterbacks should never, in a college football game, not even be like bouncing on his feet. And also just be able to say, hey, like repeatedly.
Run to the left. I've got time. Keep going.
Like, that tells you it's like a game that probably shouldn't have been scheduled. Although, hey, I will say, I don't know what year Tennessee scheduled Bowling Green, but like, if it was even like 5 years ago, that would hey, that's not bad. That's a pretty decent MAC opponent.
What are you talking about, man? Bowling Green covered. They're fine. They covered last night.
Yeah, it's funny because early it was like, oh my gosh, the spread will be, met by halftime. And then it was like, oh gosh, Bowling Green is going to cover easily. And it got a little bit interesting. You thought, what if Tennessee pops a run late? Are they going to kick a field goal? Didn't happen.
It is interesting the way it played out, because if you would have told me on the show yesterday that the game was going to be 14-6 at halftime, I probably would have had a nervous breakdown. It would have just been awful. Now, look, I'll be honest. There was never a point in that game yesterday, even when it was 14-6, where I thought that Tennessee was in any danger whatsoever of losing the game. Just more to do with Bowling Green's ineptitude than anything else. But it was kind of amazing to think about those first two drives, how smoothly Tennessee went up and down the field, how dominant they looked on the defensive side of the ball, and then it's 14-6 at halftime.
I mean, we were joking about that, weren't we? Like,
yes.
Like 17-7 or something at half, and it'll be Freakout City. Yeah. Well, imagine if those first two drives don't happen. Then I guess it would have been really interesting. And even if they were down 6-0, I think I still would have had them to almost cover the spread. But the thing is, for as bad as Bowling Green is, that's where it's like, gosh, how does a team that bad with no pass rush that is dominated up front? How does that team get that many stops in a row against you? That's a lot of you stopping yourself.
Last thought on the Vols on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Mark from Paris texting in. Milton did hold the ball too long, but he had some drops. I see the talent with him, and I think he's going to get better. And that is important to remember. It's game one in a brand new place, in a new offense. He didn't look good in the passing game. I am not just going to sit here and discount the possibility that he comes out next week against Pittsburgh, against better competition, and looks good. I think that's absolutely on the table for Joe Milton. It's important that we see it, though, because if it doesn't happen, then I think you start to get worried if you're a Tennessee fan.
It's just a huge test, and I understand for people who aren't familiar with Pittsburgh, they've been sort of a 7-5 kind of program under Pat Narduzzi, but on that side of the ball in particular, they're good. They've been good. They'll be good. They did lose both Rashad Weaver and Patrick Jones, so that's a good thing for Tennessee. They don't have those like NFL studs on the edge that they've had the last couple of years. But, man, Pat Narduzzi dials up all kinds of stuff, and I guarantee you when he looks at Joe Milton on film, I mean, he's going to have like new nicknames, triple dog, dare, whatever blitz coming at him. It's going to be a totally different kind of thing for Joe Milton.
Coming up next, we'll look ahead to a busy weekend in college football, including a couple of big matchups with SEC teams, Clemson and Georgia on the table as well. Who do you think wins between Clemson and Georgia? Hit up our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. We'll also have some Predators tickets to give away as well. That coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game. Tune in to Nashville Sounds Baseball tonight on 102.5 The Game as the Sounds continue their series versus Louisville, the AAA affiliate of the Cincinnati Reds. Pre-game show with Jeff Him starts at 5:45, and first pitch is at 6 o'clock. Nashville Sounds Baseball presented by 312 Pizza Company and Farm Bureau Health Plans. Taking on Louisville over the weekend as well, both on Saturday, first pitch at 6 on ESPN 94.9. Sunday, first pitch at 5:30 on ESPN 94.9 as well. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 102.5 The Game, presented by Volunteer State Bank. Real people, real solutions right here. Member FDIC and equal housing lender. Joe, a very interesting weekend coming up this weekend in college football. We'll get to some of the big matchups here in just a second, but right now, we've got some tickets to give away to see the Nashville Predators take on the San Jose Sharks coming up at Bridgestone Arena on October the 26th. Be caller number 5. Caller 5 at 615-737-1025. 615-737-1025 will win a pair of tickets to see the Preds take on the Sharks coming up at Bridgestone Arena on October the 26th. So hit up our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Joe, we'll get to Georgia and Clemson here in just a second. But outside of that game, what game are you most looking forward to on the college football slate coming up this weekend?
You know, that's a tough question. That is a tough question. I'm looking forward to a lot. Now, a bunch of Sparty homers are going to make me, watch that tonight. That's, Michigan State, Northwestern. That I want it on the record. I will be watching that because I live with Sparty homers, okay? But in the Big Ten, there are more interesting games such as Penn State, Wisconsin. It's a really interesting game in Madison. Iowa, Indiana. Fascinating couple of games in the Big Ten. The USC LSU game, I'm all in on that one for sure. I am interested in Florida State, Notre Dame. I really look forward to hanging over Ubben's head that I was right, that Florida State can make that a game.
I hope you're right. I don't have a lot of confidence.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm not right, then I'll try to hope we can all forget that I said that. I like his call of Texas, Louisiana. That's a sneaky, interesting game. Look, today, 5 o'clock, North Carolina at Virginia Tech, which actually, if you really want to talk about fandom, that's really my team, by the way.
Yeah.
Because my little brother. That's an interesting game. I'm not answering your question, but I am highlighting that it's a great first week. There are some first weeks that are not nearly this good. So, and in the SEC, you've got some stinkers, of course, and I think Alabama, Miami will be a stinker. But Louisville, Ole Miss should be a fun time Monday. I mean, I think that's going to be, if you like watching offense, as long as Louisville, I don't know. Now you guys have got me Louisville. You got me self-conscious about how to say that. But as long as they can kind of keep up, that could be a ton of fun.
Underrated game of the weekend, which I don't think is underrated nationally, but is around here. I'm looking forward to a little Penn State, Wisconsin. Can James Franklin bounce back after a tough season a year ago? And I don't know that it's going to be the most aesthetically pleasing football out there. I think Wisconsin's favored by 5.5. The over-under on FanDuel Sportsbook is 49.5. So not a lot of points expected in that game. But little classic Big Ten football matchup right off the bat.
Yeah, no, I like that one. I absolutely like that one. By the way, this reminded me, last night, sometimes you're covering a game and then the score will come up and it's like, whoa. I remember UT Martin was beating Western Kentucky. I think well into the second quarter.
Yeah.
But I'm looking now and I see that turned out 59-21. So, yeah, for Western Kentucky, which is what it should have been. But that was one that I was like, ooh, watch that one. Also, last night, I didn't get to watch any of it because of the Tennessee game. But I don't know how the heck UCF flips around a 21-0 deficit. But good for Gus, because otherwise it's just Gus misery just starting right away.
That's right.
In Orlando. And look, I'm covering it. I'm not just saying it because I'm covering it, but I am very interested to see Vanderbilt, East Tennessee State, first game of the Clark Lee era. How different does that team look? We were asking the text line earlier, who's better, Bowling Green or East Tennessee State? And I tell you what, I bet you it's awfully close.
I bet it is.
Like if Bowling Green, because it shouldn't be, MAC teams should be better than almost other than the elite FCS teams. But I bet you that'd be a good game. I think they're very comparable. So if Vanderbilt wins by 33, then we know they're better than Tennessee. Take it to the bank. They will win the rivalry game against Tennessee.
That's right. The transitive property in college football.
Yes.
Very good
Always
to see.
works.
That's right. All right, so the big game of the weekend, obviously, in college football is a top 5 matchup. Number 5, Georgia. Number 3, Clemson. And we've been talking about this game all week long to a certain degree, but let's dive hot and heavy into it now. What are you most intrigued by in this game between Georgia and Clemson, and who do you think ultimately ends up winning between Georgia and Clemson?
Well, I'm intrigued with just the JT Daniels discussion. I mean, there's some serious excitement about him and what he might be, and he is an interesting case. A huge recruit, did not go well at USC. Then he's hurt last year. You see it late, like, okay, you can see the talent. Is he ready to come into a game like this? It's just like Ohio State last night. I am not even that familiar with Clemson's roster. I just know they've got dudes everywhere.
DJ Uiagalelei.
I knew that you were going to use this opportunity to say that name. You were incredibly good at saying that name.
I saw DJ Uiagalelei in a commercial last night, too. Dr. Pepper commercial.
Really?
Oh, yeah, man.
Oh, that's awesome. By the way, I see John Fulgerson has like a local hardware store NIL deal. It's amazing to watch him. Load it up, Johnny. He's not going to be an NBA player. Go load up the NIL. Of it, buddy. Absolutely. But that's the thing. That's what I was going to say. DJU, I think, is going to outplay JT Daniels. And I think Clemson's going to win. Clemson has championship DNA, and Kirby's got to show me something here. Kirby, it's not Mark Richt, but you remember all those years Mark Richt, he would 10 games every year. They're very good, but people would say, yeah, but Georgia could be better than that. Some people think it's the best job in college football. Kirby Smart has taken it to another level. I mean, he got him to within a play of winning the national championship. So you can't say the guy hasn't done a really good job. I don't know, man. I think right now he reminds me actually of Dabo a few years ago. Can you actually get over the hump and win the huge game? At some point he probably will, and maybe this will be it. But right now I've got my money on Clemson.
Clemson favored by 2.5 in this game on the FanDuel Sportsbook. One thing that is going to be interesting, and Trevor Maddich talked about this the other day as well. I think there's an idea in people's head that Clemson's defense is not very good based on what we saw the last time they were on the field and them just getting obliterated by Justin Fields and Ohio State. The talk out of Clemson is this could be one of the best defenses they've ever had, maybe the best defense they've ever had in Clemson. We heard David Ubben talk about Georgia earlier and their defense, what they're going to bring to the table. This could be a pretty low-scoring game. Now, low-scoring relatively speaking. I mean, I think the days of your 10-7 or 13-10 slugfests in college football are probably largely gone based on the way the game's played nowadays.
Let's hope.
This could be I think, a real defensive battle between Georgia and Clemson coming up this weekend. But I said it earlier on Call Your Shot Friday. I've been consistent all week long. I like Georgia in this game. I think they're going to pull off the slight upset. I think this is the signature win that Kirby Smart is looking for. Give me the Bulldogs in this game.
All right. Well, we're basically, by the way.
Next week, we're going to start it.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, we really could be doing some pigskin picks and going right head-to-head with this. But, yeah, next week we'll start it when we have the NFL and college together.
Yep.
Pigskin pick 'em. We've got a fantasy draft. We got a lot of stuff.
I'm excited.
It's all happening. It's all happening. Yeah, look, I'm not going to be shocked if Georgia wins. It's going to. I can't wait to watch this game. And by the way, that's another streaming situation in the press box to watch the Duke's Mayo Classic. What is the over/under? So the over/under. Okay, I was going to say. I feel like I swear I was going to say this before I read the line. I feel like this is like a nice in-between game when you're talking about high score, like a 27-24 game.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like it is. And by the way, the over-under, 50.5. Once again, when is Vegas going to pluck me out of Nashville? I don't know, but they're missing the boat.
Just waiting on it to happen. That's right. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation on the weekend of college football coming up. A full slate on the docket. Also, time for NSC Pick to Click as well coming up next. So be the first caller at 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025 to guess the goal scorer for Nashville SC tonight. If you get it right, you'll win a prize pack and a 4-pack of tickets to an upcoming Nashville SC home game. We'll do that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode here on ESPN 1025 The Game.
It's hooked in and headed in! Delirium! Yonder Cadiz!
Who's going to find the back of the net in the upcoming Nashville SC match? Robby and Rexrode make their picks to click for the match and welcome a listener to do the same. NSC Pick to Click on ESPN 1025 The Game is brought to you by Camarena Tequila.
And it is that time of the week, time for NSC Pick to Click here on ESPN 1025 The Game, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. Nashville SC in action tonight at Nissan Stadium, taking on New York City. We need your participation. The listener has been good in this competition. Hit up our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025 for your opportunity to guess the goal scorer for tonight's game for Nashville SC against New York City coming up at Nissan Stadium. Joe Rexrode, I'll be in the house tonight watching a little Nashville SC action. Looking forward to it. A lot of soccer coming up this weekend for Robby Stanley.
That's awesome. I love it. And maybe you'll see me again be correct with my pick to click, as I was last time.
Maybe so. So that brings the standings in the competition up to this. The listeners remain at 6 correct answers, which, honestly, is just pretty astounding that they've been that successful in this competition. Joe Rexrode moves into second place with 2. 2 correct answers for Joe Rexrode.
Coming for you, listeners.
Michelle Knezovic, Ryan Porth, both with 1 correct answer, and Robby Stanley remains at 0. Joe, who picked first last week? Do we remember?
I picked first.
Michelle picked first.
I didn't go with my gut.
Oh, boy.
So, you know what, Joe? The clapping, I don't appreciate it very much over there.
That was something.
I'm only doing that because I'm away from you guys, so I can be more taunting in a different city.
That's right. So that means it'll be a little bit later on the books today for Michelle. It is, that was some very Robby Stanley luck that Michelle had last week with Randall Leal scoring the empty net goal the one time that Michelle doesn't pick Randall Leal. That's a tough one there.
It is. Your loss, my gain. Sorry, but man, let's move forward.
That's right. Absolutely. So we will move forward. Joe Rexrode, you've got the first pick today. So with that in mind, your pick for Nashville SC pick to click is whom?
See, you zag when they think you're going to zig. You zig when you think they're going to zag.
That's
I
right.
had Sapong. I didn't take him last week. Now I will. CJ Sapong. Thank you.
CJ Sapong, the selection by Joe Rexrode here on the competition. And it looks like we have a listener as well that's called in. So Rexrode gets a leg up on the competition. CJ Sapong off the board today for the listeners. So
sorry, listener,
a little bit
you were
more
late.
of a challenging time for the listeners today. Let's go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in Nathan, who is today's participant in NSC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. Nathan, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're great. Appreciate you taking time to call in. So CJ Sapong off the board in the competition. Who is your pick to click, Nathan, tonight for Nashville SC against New York City?
I'm going to go with hopefully the new guy, Ake Loba.
There you go. Ake Loba, the selection by Nathan. Nathan, we appreciate you calling in.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. Nathan going with Ake Loba in the maybe the first time a listener has selected Loba. I have to go back and check the tape on that.
You've tried it 7 times.
I have. I've been unsuccessful 7 times. So you know what that means. Ake Loba scoring a goal tonight, Joe Rexrode. Absolutely
Pretty much.
going to happen at that point.
Pretty much.
Michelle Knezovic, the next pick belongs to you. Are you going back to Old Faithful?
I am going back to my roots, Randall Leal. And I have faith. You know what?
That'd be 2 in a row.
He's going to score a goal. And then Rexrode, we will be tied on pick to click. All right?
Very nice.
I'm manifesting it right now. That's my called shot. Rexrode and I will be tied on pick to click.
There you go.
I like the confidence.
Well, that leaves Hani Mukhtar for me. So I'm going to take him. Give me Hani Mukhtar tonight for Nashville SC to score. And I'll take it a step further, Joe Rexrode. Remember, in Call Your Shot Friday, I say that Nashville SC scores a goal in the opening 10 minutes of the game. Mukhtar will be the one to score that goal in said opening 10 minutes. So what do you think about that?
I love it. So you've sort of conflated this with your called shot that also will be wrong. I love it. Put it all together.
We appreciate that. That is today's edition of NSC Pick to Click, brought to you by Camarena Tequila. Right now, Joe Rexrode, Harry Douglas is on TV on First Take and has predicted that the Tennessee Titans will reach the Super Bowl this season. So Harry Douglas is predicting that the Titans go to the Super Bowl.
Okay. Is he also predicting the Falcons to play them?
Well, maybe
he could be
so.
a homer for both of his former
teams.
teams.
Maybe so.
One of those picks actually could happen. So interesting.
Right. By the way, some good news on the NHL front. I'm glad that they've made the right decision on this, but it looks like this coming out from the NHL and the NHLPA that NHL players will be allowed to participate in the Winter Olympics. So it looks like NHL players will be allowed to go to the Winter Olympics coming up in February of 2022. Nice. And quite frankly, Joe, that just makes the Winter Olympics hockey a whole lot better when the pros are in there. I realize the Miracle on Ice was great. It's awesome. It's a different time. We did it. We tried it last time without the NHL players in there, and quite frankly, nobody cared. It's time to get them back in there.
Absolutely. No, I'm excited about that. Actually, that's not the only encouraging NHL news, by the way. They are actually allowing locker room access for vaccinated media, and I have to stand up and applaud the NHL for this. And also, I mean, many times I've said the NHL should never be behind the NFL in access, and yet it is in many ways. Well, here's a chance for the NFL to look at this and say, guys, come on, let's pick it up. Of course, then we won't even get into college sports. Like Georgia is not doing in person. Georgia, is going to have full stadium.
Yeah. Right.
They are not doing in person interviews right now. So I mean, add that up in your head.
That's a interesting conclusion they've come to on that front there. But hey, it just means more in the SEC.
Well, it does, but I mean, Tennessee gave us in-person interviews last night. So Josh Heupel, superior to Kirby Smart as a coach in at least one way we've identified today.
That is correct. We'll see if they can figure things out as they look ahead to game week number 2 coming up. Vanderbilt in action tomorrow night against ETSU. Looking forward to that game coming up. We'll react to that on Monday as well. Going to be a very interesting weekend of college football here, Joe Rexrode. I'm looking forward to it. It's like feels like the Christmas morning to me, the opening weekend of college football. It's finally back.
It's awesome. I mean, there's stuff today, and there's an absolute smorgasbord tomorrow, and there's a little bit more Sunday, a little bit more Monday.
A little lane train on Monday night we can look ahead to.
I mean, there's only a couple days in the next, 10 that won't have football. And one of those days, we're going to have a draft.
That's right.
I mean, basically, we just have to, sweat through Tuesday night, and we are home free here.
That is correct. That does it for us today here on Robby and Rexrode, presented by Volunteer State Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender. We'll be back at 6 a.m. on Monday morning. Darren Donica Chase coming up next. This is ESPN 102.5 The Game.